yeah, I think we can get started when it's time.
Give it 5 more minutes and then we'll start. Joined. Erica. Okay.
So Russell and Sherry, everybody who's signed up for the meeting so far is actually already here. So,
all right. So why don't you give your spiel and then we'll start. Hopefully, other people will join us.
All right, I'll give the Cliff Notes version since most everybody here knows the way around our Zoom meetings. But if you don't, if you're been a while since you've been in one of our meetings, you notice that everybody's muted right now. You're going to stay muted throughout the duration of the meeting, except for whenever one of our co-chairs, Russell or Sherry, calls on you. Whenever you hear your name, look for a prompt on your screen asking you to confirm unmuting. If you would like to speak or you'd like to ask a question of our presenters, or our co-chairs, you can participate by going to the React icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button. It's the button that says raise hand. It's not the one that waves or the thumbs up. Those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're having problems, the chat's available for technical support to help with Zoom software problems. It is not to ask questions of the presenters or the co-chairs. You'll need to raise your hand and audibly ask those questions or make those comments. If you're having a problem with Zoom, you can always chat me. I'm here for support. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sherry and Russell.
Okay. Thank you, Will. On behalf of my co-chair, Russell Squire, and myself, I'd like to welcome you to our Community Board 8 Charter Revision Task Force. Let me give you a little, some of you may have been involved when we did this the last time. I remember one of the big topics there was the length of time of a community board member. So many of us were involved with that. But let me just refresh you on what is the city charter. The charter of the City of New York functions as the local constitution and sets out the structure, powers, and responsibilities of New York City's government. The charter establishes the institutions and processes of the city's political system and broadly defines the authority and responsibilities of city agencies and elected officials, which include the mayor, the city council, the controller, the borough presidents, and the public advocate. Charter Revision Commission may propose a broad set of amendments that essentially overhauls the entire charter, or it may narrowly focus its proposals on certain areas, or it can even make a new charter. The proposed amendments must be within the city's local legislative powers as set forth in the state constitution and state law. And then they are submitted to voters as a question or a series of questions. So this round of charter commissions was started by Mayor Adams on May 21st, 2024. He established the 2024 Charter Commission, and he appointed Carlo Cesura as chair and 12 under community leaders to serve on the commission. And he charged the commission with reviewing the entire charter to ensure that it works efficiently and is responsive to all New Yorkers. The mayor also asked the commission to examine in particular whether the charter can be amended to promote public safety and fiscal responsibility. Russell, did you want to say anything to start, or I'll introduce our speakers?
I would just say that the purpose of this meeting is for the community board and with the benefit of input from members of the community to get an understanding of specific charter revision possibilities that are on the table, and ultimately hopefully be able to have a resolution that we can recommend to the full board so that the board can be part of this process for the city.
Okay. All right. So since one of the mayor's area that he wanted studied on was fiscal responsibility, the Independent Budget Office, the IBO, put together a whole list of recommendations which they submitted to the commission. And we have invited representatives from the IBO to come and address us on what their recommendations are. I'd like to first thank Tina. Sorry, I even made notes. And she's Chief of Outreach and an Engagement Officer for the IBO, and she helped get the other speakers. We'll be hearing from Marla Simpson, who is the Special Assistant to the Director, and Val Gordino, who's an analyst in budget and policy transactions. And she's going to give us an overview. Marla's going to talk to us particularly about what the IBO is recommending. And I guess Marla also, and now that we've reviewed the preliminary report, how much have they adopted? I know when Russell and I were talking about the preliminary report, it's so, everything they say it needs more study. So what was your—
I can provide some context.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I would like to say that I'm particularly honored to be back at Community Board 8. But the last time I presented at Community Board 8 was about 32 years ago, when I was land use director for Ruth Messenger as borough president. So this is not my first appearance at Community Board 8, but I'm happy to be here tonight.
Oh, we're happy to have you.
In any case, Val, you want to put up our little presentation document, and let me start by giving a little additional context. I think your overview of charter was excellent. But one of the things that I think is very confusing to not just members of the public, but even to a lot of government pros, is the way it works when you have competing ideas of charter revision. And essentially, state law governs how we can do charters locally. And so what started this particular one, if you think about it that way, was the city council's effort to amend the charter. And they were amending the charter in a way that would alter the power of the mayor. That was their goal, because they wanted appointment authority over certain commissionerships. And under state law, and I've never really understood this particular provision, and I researched it and tried to figure out the rationale, still couldn't understand it. But there is a provision in state law that says you can get a charter revision commission 3 ways. You can get it because the local legislature wants to do it. You can get it because the public petitions for a charter revision, or you can get it from the mayor appointing one. And state law goes on and says, if the mayor chooses to appoint one, that then cancels the ability of anyone else to get to the ballot. So when you have a situation where a mayor, and this happened a couple of times under Bloomberg, this is not unprecedented, although the time frame this time is very short. Whenever you have a situation where the city council is about to do something charter-wise that the mayor is trying to avoid, one simple way for the mayor to do that is to appoint their own charter commission, which then it becomes the only one that can get to the ballot. So let's go forward, start our little presentation here. And for those of you who have not previously encountered the Independent Budget Office, we are a creation of the 1989 charter. It was a charter revision commission in 1989 that decided that there needed to be a nonpartisan agency that would provide budget, policy, data-driven information on city government, and that would make that those findings and that research available to elected officials and to the members of the public. And so that's we have certain mandated reports that we come out with every year when the budget documents are released, but we also answer questions, you know, can be as simple as what's going on with charter. And we will, you know, we are able to give those that kind of information to the public, sometimes through formal reports and sometimes through other kinds of work products that are, you know, more quick to release. So let's move on. As Sherry pointed out, because we saw this coming and we realized that fiscal responsibility triggered a lot of questions about budget, we were one of the first organizations sort of out of the gate to come out with recommendations that were presented at a very early hearing to this commission. And well, everything is relative. All these hearings, you could say one was earlier than the other, but they've only been going on for a few weeks. There are a couple this week, and I think there's one or two later in July, and their final meeting will be July 25th, at which time they will adopt whatever their proposal is. And I believe that after July 25th, they only have about 5 days.
August 5th, yeah, August 5th, they have to.
Yeah, they have to get everything to the clerk for voting. So in real terms, for, you know, those of us who've been around government for a while, we recognize that much of what is going to be in their proposal is probably already written somewhere in their, you know, documents. So when I give you an overview of where we are, one of the things I'm trying to do is to focus on where there still is some movement going on, because you know, if you're trying to weigh in, those are areas where presumably you would have more chance of having an impact. So of the things that we mentioned, there's really only one major recommendation and a minor one that are in some sense still alive, in my judgment. It is clear that they are interested in putting some additional heft behind the fiscal impact analysis process. As you may know, every time the city council is going to have a hearing on a proposed local law, when they're going to vote on it in committee, they are required under the charter today to do a fiscal impact statement and to release that at the time that at least by the time that they're going to have a committee vote. There's also a provision in the charter today that says if they want to, the city council may request through the chair of the committee for IBO to do an independent fiscal analysis for them on a proposed local law. That's very rare that happens, but we do it informally a lot of times, even when members who are not the committee chair are interested in a fiscal analysis. But my point is the fiscal analysis of every proposed law has been around for decades. What is happening here is that, and you can tell this from the mayor's press release, is that they are looking to put more guardrails or requirements on that process because presumably the city's budget office has not been satisfied with the analytics that have gone into some of the council's estimates of the cost of major pieces of legislation that the council has passed. So one of the discussions that was very focused in some of the early hearings at the commission was, how do you do that? Because if you just give the fiscal impact analysis to the mayor's office of management and budget and say they're doing it, that isn't necessarily going to have a lot of credibility with the council. That was, so our position when we were describing how to improve the role was to really focus on what are the circumstances where an independent voice would be more helpful and would get dollars, the actual dollar value sort of out in so that the public would understand. And again, speaking, in general terms, I will say there have been occasions throughout the years when the council has asked for IBO to look at the cost of various types of legislation, and our estimates have in fact been higher than the council's estimates. So it's not like they would all be the same, although it does tend to happen often in the budgeting process that OMB will estimate very high, and other parties will estimate lower. So we thought that we could add value, and we gave some suggestions to the commission about having a way to do that, particularly with bills that had the potential to really impact the budget. One figure that was tossed out in the hearing was the figure of $100 million. We didn't really settle on a particular number that we were supporting, but just the idea of looking carefully at bills that were going to cost a significant amount of money.
Paula, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you IBO to add value, so in addition to the dollar amount, is there a description of what is add value?
Yeah, what we meant by add value is we were basically saying, right now you've got a system in the charter, at least on paper, that says, well, if the council wants to, they can ask for an IBO analysis. But in 30 plus years, we could only find one example when the actual charter process was followed. And mostly the council just does its own analyses. And occasionally an individual member will ask us for a separate analysis, but it's more ad hoc. So since there was a lot of, and for those of you, I assume some of you followed in the housing area, this past year, there was a big dispute about the so-called City for HEPS program, which provides financial subsidies to prevent households from becoming homeless. And the city council expanded that program significantly this year. And there have been competing estimates. The council's estimate, it wasn't nothing. The council estimated it at several $billion potential cost. But the mayor's office estimated it much higher, and IBO did not do a formal estimate. And some of that was because of some confusing language in the statute itself. But in any case, that was, I think, one of the big focal points originally. A lot of the other things that you hear testimony on from city agencies over the past several weeks when they've been holding these hearings have been about bills that the city council passed that various agencies felt were burdensome or annoying, but not really costly. I mean, when you're talking about a bill that imposes a requirement to collect data and issue reports, that type of legislation is not really significant from a cost standpoint when you consider a $110 billion budget. But many agencies object to it for other reasons. But so there's a lot of sort of confusion about what exactly fiscal accountability, what is intended, and it depends a little bit on where you sit. But our thought was that if the Charter Commission was really trying to provide an opportunity for real public understanding of how large pieces of legislation can impact the budget and that matter to every New Yorker, that we could help define when is that happening, what bills are big enough, and we could help develop a charter language that would require instead of making it optional, require an independent analysis when you had a bill that really had that major fiscal impact. At the end of the day, from what we can see publicly, from the staff report, and from just talking to people in the process, it still looks like they're going to do something on the fiscal impact statement area, but they may not do anything as sort of carefully crafted as we were looking for. And they may very well be trying to create a formal role for the city's Office of Management and Budget. And again, I want to point out that just like IBO, if OMB wants to put out a fiscal analysis of a piece of pending legislation, there is nothing that stops them from doing that now. So it's a little bit unclear to observers what the commission is thinking about doing. Some people have suggested in testimony that the council somehow be prevented from being able to pass a bill that has a potential large impact if there isn't an appropriation in the budget to pay for it. And that's a complicated recommendation on the part of people who are making it, because the charter does not allow the council to just amend the budget in the middle of the year. So some observers have looked at some of these recommendations and thought that essentially what they may be trying to do is to bottle up legislation that could have a large cost and push all of the consideration of that type of legislation into the budget process itself, rather than have a situation where the council could pass a bill in the middle of the year and therefore have a requirement imposed on the administration. Again, getting back to the housing bill that I mentioned, what happened was the bill passed. It passed with a veto-proof majority. The veto was overridden. It was therefore law, but the administration did not implement it. So there is now litigation pending on the status of that program. And so that's kind of what we were simply saying is maybe we could be a trusted, neutral process that would help advance all viewpoints in that type of process. And by saying that this is still alive, what I'm really saying to you is something is likely to come out of that commission with a label on it that says fiscal impact analysis. Whether that analysis will actually be something that adds value to the legislative process remains to be seen. I think some of the commissioners certainly understood that issue and felt that there were, and we're not the only ones, many other civic groups spoke in favor of having a neutral analysis in that process. But again, I flag that to your attention. I'll mention some of our other recommendations, but to our knowledge, the other ones are not really alive in terms of likelihood of having recommendations made. On this page, the only other one that we mentioned, which I don't know if it's an issue that has impacted your board, today there is a requirement for public hearings to be held on relatively small contracts, $100,000, which can be sometimes even a small contract that might be a city council award or something. And many parties, including the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, have recommended over the years that the hearing threshold be changed, as we did. That is listed in the charter, in the staff report as an agency recommendation. And it's possible that that recommendation is also still alive, but that's the only other one that we mentioned that it appears to have some traction. If you want to switch to the next slide, I can just quickly, I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I'll give you a sense of what some of the other things we were trying to do were. The one on the top about units of appropriation is one that really does matter to a lot of community boards because it's so hard to understand the budget. Going back to 1989, one of the things that charter commissions consistently said was that the public can't tell whether programs are being cut or increased because the budget categories, which are called units of appropriation, are so large. If you wanted today to look up whether after-school programs were increased in funding in the last budget, you can't tell because after-school programs are in the same unit of appropriation as I think it's employment programs, immigrant services programs, and one other category at DYCB. So if you're trying to figure out what happened to your after-school program, you kind of can't. So we were basically arguing that it should go back to the original intent, which was that each program, that the public understood to be a separate program, would have its own budget line, and that would be called a unit of appropriation. Other parties also spoke in favor of that. From what we can see, that doesn't appear to be on the radar of the commission to do anything. The other areas that we mentioned had to do with things that I'm sure you've heard about from organizations in your community. We urged for action on a couple of procurement issues, particularly the late payments that affect human services providers. And from our standpoint, if you look at it as a budget issue, it is a tremendous budget issue because essentially the value of what we are putting into the budget is often lost over time because of how hard it is for providers to collect funds, and it is driving it is causing a lot of financial distress in that sector. So we mentioned it from that standpoint. And then we also made some recommendations along with a lot of other civic groups about the so-called rainy day fund or the city's reserve accounts, asking that those that there be clearer rules on how those were to be used in the charter. Again, no indication any of that is happening. And then just to close out, why don't you advance it a little bit? What the staff is talking about, it does seem that they are looking at the fiscal accountability issue, and they would be making it. They would be trying to do something. It seems that they want to do it earlier. Maybe they want to have it, even if it's just the council doing it. Maybe they want to have it happen before the hearing as opposed to before the vote. That would be one issue. There are some other very vague language about harmonizing the budget with the council's power to pass local laws. As best as we can tell, that probably refers to the stuff I was talking about where people think that maybe they would prevent the city council from passing legislation that had a price tag other than at the time that they were able to amend the budget. That would be seen by the city council as a huge affront to their power and to their status as the city's chief legislative body. The city council has made no secret of the fact through the speaker and through several members that they find this whole charter process pretty disappointing, perhaps loathsome to some of them. And so if you try to actually not just require them to see a fiscal analysis by the administration, but if you actually tried to limit what they could do in the face of a analysis by the administration, the city council would find that extremely difficult to accept. The other provisions that are in there in the staff report seem to be more neutral, just making it clearer that the capital strategy is supposed to relate to the required infrastructure assessment. One of them is related to the condition of infrastructure. The other is related to what you're going to do going forward. And the charter doesn't technically say that they have to relate to each other, so that there's some indication that maybe they would amend the charter to include a direct linkage, and a couple of other things budget-wise that may be just clarifying issues. I want to make one other quick note about the state law on charters. One of the other reasons why you often see these small or small-ish things that are in charter reports is that state law does require for a charter commission to be valid, they have to look at the whole charter and consider the whole charter. They do not have to, as Sherry pointed out, they can very much decide that they're only going to propose changes to a few limited parts, but they have to show legally that they looked at the whole thing. So sometimes with some of these charter commissions, you'll see a bunch of stray recommendations at the end of the report that will be all grouped into a proposal on the ballot that will say something like, efficiency in government. And so sometimes they have a bunch of things in there that are really partly there because it shows that they considered the whole charter. Moving on, here's the mystery one, public safety. Everybody's in favor of public safety. A lot of disagreement about what the best way to effectuate that is. It is really unclear to a lot of observers how the charter can influence public safety. Some of the testimony from advocates and even from some of the city agencies seems to be saying that they want to limit the city council's power to legislate in this area. That would seem to be quite unusual. I'm not, I don't know, I'm not an expert on New York State constitutional law. I'm for those who don't know, I am a recovering attorney, but that's not an area that I practiced in ever. So I think that there's some question about how far they can go down that road, but it's very clear from the report and from the initial press release that they do want something in the charter about public safety. So if the board has recommendations in that area, that is definitely something that is still being debated and considered, and that they would very much like to do something on, although it is really not clear from the report what their something will look like. Moving on.
The report seemed on many areas, it said, well, we have to do more studies, so we're not making any recommendations. So they touched upon it.
All right. Val, let's go to the next one. Yeah. Then there's a whole, I'm not even going to list all the miscellaneous ones. This really fits in the category. We'll send you the presentation. You'll have the list. This fits in the category of when I said sometimes they just put a lot of things into a proposal and they group them all on one ballot item. And it's partly just to say, oh yeah, we took a really good hard look at the whole charter and there were only a few things that we needed to fix, but here they are. And so these are things that the staff is proposing. All of them are pretty simple. We looked at them. There didn't seem to be anything that triggered a significant budget change or issue. Obviously, anytime you set up a new city agency, that will have a budget impact, but there's certainly a lot of resources that are already dedicated to the MWBE program. So that is one area where you might see a charter proposal. And then the last group of things that we listed are the things that they put in the report. Do you want to go to the last slide, Val? They put them in the report, but they didn't endorse them as being from the staff. And just again, for those of you who aren't familiar, the so-called staff of the Charter Commission are really just people from the law department who have been detailed to do that work. And so this list of proposals didn't come from the law department, but it came from other city commissioners in the Adams administration. So this is another list of things that might turn up in a final proposal because they are coming already from agencies that are part of the administration that appointed the commission. so that we list them for your, knowledge and consideration, just so that you have it. We think that, again, I've been watching charter commissions since 1989, but sometimes they surprise you. It's possible that things that we do not think are alive for recommendation might turn up to be. But this is our best guess at what is going on today relative to what we proposed and what others have proposed. And I can answer any questions that you may have.
Can you please send the presentation to Will before you leave the meeting, please? Because I think it's going to be helpful even after you're gone for us to continue the discussion.
I can send it in the chat right away.
That's great. Thank you very much. So Sherry, go ahead.
Our next presenter is Val, who's an assistant budget and policy analyst. And Val, I understood you had gone to many of the public meetings and you could give us a sense of what the public is asking for.
Sure. Yes, I
That
attended.
you were going to talk about. And
Sure, I'll go ahead and talk about the Charter Revision Commission hearing that I attended on June 20th. So I think the major theme throughout the public was saying a lot of what they were saying was that they wanted more public input in the legislative process with City Council. So that was a major theme. And the NYPD testified as well as the public advocate. So I would say that's a major theme. They wanted more an increase in public's an emphasis of public safety in the charter, as well as increased public input and in the legislative process.
did you get any sense of an area that the commissioners seem to be particularly interested in, or?
I think public input, as I mentioned before, I think just an increase in pertaining to public safety, and it was a little bit vague, but I think that they mostly really wanted a lot more public input in legislative processing. That was a theme throughout the whole hearing, that almost every single party that testified mentioned that.
Said that. All right.
One observation I would make to that is that if you look at, and all this stuff is I think are they posting their testimony, Val, or not?
No, I don't believe so, but I can double check on that.
Recordings though, because I listened to one recording, so I know they're posting recordings.
Yes.
The only point I would make is that many of the people who are clamoring for input are clamoring for input to achieve directly opposite goals. So there is, there definitely are people who are testifying in ways that make it seem that they would support the administration's idea of restricting the city council's role on public safety legislation, such as the legislation about the number of stops, or legislation on solitary confinement. But there are also people testifying who are talking about more public input in order to regulate the police. So it really, the question of public input is sort of separate from the question of to do what.
Okay, I think to move this along, I have City Council Chair Adrian Adams had made some points that I'd like to, they're very simple. I have them broken down just to sentences. And then why don't we open up some discussion from the members of the board and the public if we're going to try to come up with areas that we would like to put input in. Let me point out the timing on this, though. The final commission hearing is, well, the written testimony has to be in by this Friday. And the final commission hearing is July 25th, which is going to be at the Brooklyn Public Library. And as we said, they have to give a report to the council, the clerk, by August 5th. So this is moving along very, very rapidly. As it turns out, there is a hearing, public hearing in Manhattan tonight, up in Harlem, but we didn't know that when we scheduled this meeting. So let me just read you what City Council Speaker Adams recommended. One is take more time, delay ballot issues until 11:25. This was the same thing. I had listened to one of the hearings, and Assemblywoman Glick also said, what are you rushing this for? Let's hold off. And then, of course, the main issue that many of us think is the reason that the mayor jumped on this, her recommendation was to allow the city council to advise and consent on mayor's appointments to be on the ballot this year, and make certain appropriations in the budget more specific, and tie the civilian complaint review board to the New York Police Department's budget. Those were the main items that she had requested in her testimony. So why don't we open it up for discussion?
Well, can we limit it to questions in the first instance? Because what I want to do is to sort of maximize and be respectful of our speaker's time. If we can just sort of first limit it to questions that folks have for them, and then I think we can have a more sort of wider ranging discussion.
All right. Well, Russell, do you want to go ahead, call?
Yeah, let's go to, Erica has had her hand up for a while. So if you have a question, go ahead, please.
I do. I think, Marla, this question, and thanks for presenting, because I only found out about this probably 3 weeks ago. So,
Yeah.
like with everybody else, it sounds like. So a couple of things, just so I can clarify this in my head. So were you saying that the city council didn't officially call for a committee to be formed, but was just talking about it, and so the mayor then officially called and organized? Because that's very confusing. Like, it should be.
What the city council was doing is the state law is called the municipal home rule law, and it provides a framework for how charters can be revised locally. The city council doesn't have to have a commission to do a charter. There has been precedent in the past when, like, I think it happened under de Blasio, when the council and the mayor cooperated and did a commission together. But the city council can put a charter provision directly on the ballot, simply by essentially passing it at the council. Normally, when local laws are passed by the council, they take effect based on the council's passage of them, at whether the mayor signs it or whether his veto is overridden. It goes like that. There is an exception to what the council is allowed to do, and that is the council cannot, and the legal term that's used is called curtailment or curtail. The council cannot curtail the power of the mayor through a local law. So if they want to do what they were trying to do here, is they were trying to have more positions in the administration be subject to advice and consent approval by the council, which is similar to the federal system. They were trying to get that locally for a lot more commissioner positions within the mayor's administration. And because that, by definition, takes power away from the mayor, it would be a curtailment, and they don't have the power to do that unless they put it to a vote. So they were getting themselves geared up to pass the bill that they knew would then require it to go on to the ballot as a charter proposal for public up or down vote. Under the same state law that gave them their authority, there is this other authority that that sort of is a, I don't know. What comes to mind is get out of jail free, but I don't mean that. The mayor has a sort of a trump card that if the mayor decides that they don't want the council's measure to get to the ballot, any mayor who is in that position can say, you know what? You think you're going to put a charter vote on the ballot, but you're not, because I am. And under state law, the mayor's version always takes precedence. And what's odd about it is that it doesn't just get there first or have like a preferential position. It literally prevents the other proposal from being on the ballot at all. There were times, and I think this happened during Bloomberg, when they did it multiple years in a row because the council would keep trying to do something and the mayor's office would not want that to get to the ballot. So they just had multiple commissions a couple of times.
The second question I have, when you started off, you said that there were only a few pieces left that could be impacted. So not only did we hear about this just like 3 weeks ago, the public, and most of the public doesn't know about it, I promise you, because I've joined 2 different sessions now. The one that was just earlier today up in Harlem, and then I think the Brooklyn one a few weeks ago, when I first heard about it. So basically, like with everything that happens with our local governments, you're saying most of this is a done deal already. And whatever the questions are going to be on the ballot. We just don't know yet.
Things surprise us all the time. It's not a done deal. They haven't held a vote. What history would tell you is, you know, if you go back and all these charter commissions and all their prior reports are posted on the same website for New York City Charter. Most of the time, what gets in the staff report is what gets on the ballot in some form or another. Could they decide to put something on the ballot that isn't even mentioned in the staff report? Yes, they could, and they might. But most of the time, the staff report becomes sort of the blueprint for what they will do on the ballot, which is why, again, we thought we made a number of proposals that were more interesting than some of the things that are in the staff report. But we chose to focus tonight's presentation on the staff report because our belief is that for you, you know, as a board to be having input now, yeah, you're free to make a recommendation totally out of the blue sky, something that hasn't even been mentioned by anybody else. But history would say that the staff report suggestions are more likely to happen one way or the other. So
and who can we reach out to for this whole thing about, it feels like whoever gets to the finish line first gets to stop the clock, essentially.
That would be it's state law. The Assembly and Senate control it. It would be a really difficult law to amend. I mean, let's be clear. Municipal home rule law is the same law that I'm sure you guys follow the ups and downs of the city property tax system and all the rules. You know, that there are very different rules that apply to single family houses versus multiple dwellings and co-ops and condos. All of that structure is really locked in through the municipal home rule law. When we think in New York City that we are a self-governing locality, it's kind of fictional because a lot of what we are able to do, and we have a very powerful, obviously, mayoral administration and a very active city council, but their hands are tied by state law on many topics. And that particular law is not amended frequently. And this whole issue about sort of the boomerang effect of charter commissions it's not just coming up for the first time here. This may be the shortest timeline for the announcement to the hearing, but many mayors have done the same thing. And it just seems to be a pattern. And
So
maybe
we have this is going to happen on the November ballot. We have no repercussions on that.
the only party who can keep it off the November ballot is the commission itself. They
Okay,
could decide not to do it.
thank
Just
you.
so to clarify, if they do that, if they decide, if the commission makes no recommendations, that still supersedes anything that the council would be able to do.
No, it does not. That's why they'll make a recommendation.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they have to actually recommend. Got it. Okay. All right, let's go to questions from board members. So Michelle.
Yeah, a couple of questions, and thank you very much for the presentation. Does it have to be the same, question one, does it have to be the same topic? In other words, if a city council was proposing a change, such as they were in this case over mayoral oversight or the commission or, his power, when he goes to supersede them and call for charter review, does it have to be on the same topic on which he was, I'll use the word threatened, it's the wrong word,
No,
by the city
it does not.
council? So
No.
okay, so he could call it for review of anything.
And he did. I mean, they were talking about power to approve commissioners, and
Right.
his press release is talking about cost of legislation and public safety. So they're not the same.
Okay, so at no time they can't jump in on whatever the mechanism is and say, but you're not addressing our issue. He just superseded them and calling for charter, and their concern or whatever never gets addressed.
Not in that way. I mean, look, the example which happened, and again, Gail Brewer is actually very eloquent on this topic. I just heard her talk on it recently. What has happened in the past is that for a mayor and a city council speaker or whatever, they would come together and agree on a commission and what its role would be and what topics they would cover. And so sometimes, I mean, like the one, I think it was the 2019 one that was done jointly, and it resulted in some recommendations that were clearly coming from the mayoralty and other recommendations that were coming from the council. In fact, one of the recommendations that came out of that was adopted by the voters was a requirement for advice and consent, but it wasn't for all commissioners. It was just for Corp Counsel, the city's chief lawyer. And that was a big change. I mean, for decades that was never even considered. But de Blasio agreed to form a charter commission. I think it's the same commission that was doing ranked choice voting. But anyway, in that time frame, they agreed to work together. And so that commission had some agenda items that satisfied the goals of both of the sides of City Hall.
Okay, and there's no time limit.
Before you go on, I'm just going to make a request to everybody because there's a lot of, I think, charter revision proposal related stuff to get through in this meeting. I think the whole situation with the way that the mayor is able to sort of supersede the council and all of that, I think that's pretty remarkable. And I think it may be that this task force maybe will look at that sort of subsequently. But I think in the interest of time, I want to sort of, table anything that's related to that because that's going to be a matter of state law, and just keep us focused if we can, please, on just anything related to the specific charter revision proposals that have been discussed, or that we want to see anything like that.
So you're basically talking about public safety. And when I saw that topic, public safety, you mentioned police, but to me, it could have been traffic. What exactly comes under public safety? How is it defined? It sounds very, very broad.
It is, and it can be any of those things. It's really, so far, they have not specified all we know is that there was a lot of dissatisfaction by the mayoralty with the council for particularly the legislation requiring reporting of stops and also the solitary confinement legislation. And so testimony that was coming from allies seemed to focus in that area. But again, it's very broad and the commission could go off in any direction they want to.
So in terms of what we would address, that would be our choice
Correct.
under this broad thing. The other thing is a question about wording. Whatever this decision is, and it's placed on the ballot, my observation on items that are placed on the ballot is that the actual wording that is used in describing the issue on the ballot is in itself prejudicial. Is there any way that we could address that as part of this issue?
Again, I think you'd need to consult with experts from, other parts of the world. My recollection is that the wording is decided by the city clerk, but I'm not certain of that. And you should check with, other, your city council person would probably be able to get the answer for that question.
I think that's a big issue for the way questions appear on the ballot, is that they need to be, the argument needs to be stated in a non-prejudicial way. But in the questions I've looked at over the years, they seem as though they're expressing a point of view, not presenting a factual issue to be decided by the voter. So I don't know how we can address that, but maybe there's a way we can as part of this commission. And my last question, because I want to understand it, is about things being done as a line item. Like you said, we couldn't necessarily find whether or not funding was available or happening on, for a school or education. So is that something that the Charter Commission is now addressing, and that's something that we could weigh in on because it would be up for consideration?
Well, let me answer that this way. They said they wanted to promote fiscal accountability and fiscal transparency. Those were the words in the press release. There were multiple parties that testified on what I refer to as the unit of appropriation. We were one of many people that spoke about the importance of enforcing the program-specific requirement of unit of appropriation. So that is language you can find in the charter. It's in the budget section. Tina can send you the actual section of the charter. And essentially what people are suggesting is that, that it be made, so that essentially the language right now is a little vague. There should be more specific that says it has to be so that the programs are understandable and transparent to the public.
And you can look them up based on
correct.
the topic is the
correct.
big issue.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was what, and going back to 1989, that's what they intended to do. They thought they were already doing that. It just has never, in the last 35 years.
So we can address that.
You could, and many other good government groups, I can't remember, but I think Citizens Union, a number of groups testify on that point. It is a valid point. I see no evidence in the staff report that they are currently thinking about doing anything about that issue, but it's definitely within their scope. It's an easy issue, and many people have testified in favor of that because it really would promote public understanding of the budget.
Is it, my last question, truly, is there anything in this charter review that would give the community an opportunity to address the way the city engages in signing contracts? Is there anything in there?
There's nothing that they are signaling any intention to do. The whole procurement authority of the city, its contracting power, is in the charter, and it is, again, full disclosure for those who don't know, after I worked for Ruth Messenger, I did work in the Bloomberg administration and I ran the contract shop, and it is a very strong mayoral power with almost no role for other parties. The contracting power is almost exclusive to the mayor. The charter can control that. It does not appear from any indication that we've seen in published reports, or really even from the testimony that has been given, that a lot is being considered to do about procurement.
But if we wanted to, since there's an opportunity, because there is charter revision, if we wanted to address that, could we?
It is definitely a charter topic. Yes, it is. It is the way the city does contracts is almost entirely driven by the charter.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, let's go next to Ed for questions.
Thanks. Thanks, Russell. Thank you very much. My apologies. I signed on a couple of minutes, I think, after you started your presentation. My question just is towards something I saw regarding what they refer to as a jungle primary, and this is more voting related. Am I right in asking about something I saw regarding primary voting? They call it nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan, yes.
Yeah, they call it a jungle prime. It's a jungle primary in California, and the jungle primary meaning that you can have the same parties at the top, top two.
Right. There were two commissions during Bloomberg's mayoralty that tried to get that through and didn't succeed. But yes, it has come back. I noticed even at the very first hearing that this charter commission held, a number of members of the public came forward to talk about nonpartisan elections as a goal. I didn't summarize it in my presentation, but I would direct your attention to the staff report that was issued, week, 10 days ago. They pretty much reject the idea of doing anything in the electoral space with this commission. And in some ways, I think they're saying they don't have enough time, which, of course, begs the question of what they're doing in general. But they recognize that there has been a lot of public testimony on that topic. And there is a section in the staff report that pretty much says, yeah, we're not going to do anything, or the staff is recommending that they not do anything on that at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, thought I'd just ask about that. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, Valerie, go ahead.
Thanks, Russell. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I have a couple of questions. The first is that, so I just want to get the timeline straight. So how far away from the publishing of what's going to be on the ballot are we as of now?
As I read the schedule, and Sherry, you might have a different view, but as I read the schedule, they are going to have a published report on the 25th. It's their last scheduled meeting.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And if the way government works, they're not going to be staying up all night on the 24th to write that. So that report will be starting to take shape sort of any minute now, because they need to, vet it through, all their lawyers, and they will presumably give the commission members at least a day or two to look at it before they're told that they have to vote on it. So I would think a draft is likely to start taking shape soon, if it hasn't already. That does not mean, and even for commissions that have had a lot more time and a lot more deliberation, and I remember going back to the 89 one, which was like almost a 2-year process, they do sometimes make significant changes the night before they vote, but they haven't left themselves a lot of time.
Okay, and so then after the commissioners vote, it's up or down, or is it we take some out, change a couple at the meeting, or it's basically by that point it's just up or down on whatever's presented? Typically,
there are legal requirements that come into play that have to do with sort of the germaneness of a topic to be, considered together. So for example, if they wanted to do one thing on budget and one thing on public safety, the lawyers would probably tell them that they have to split those into two questions. So when the commission issues its final report, they would be voting on each of the questions. Now, one question might have multiple changes in it, but those changes would all at least be on the same topic.
Okay, and then that's essentially what they vote on goes on the ballot in November, and that's it. Okay. So let me just ask you, I want to go back to sort of an in the weeds piece that you mentioned about contracting with vendors, most particularly not-for-profits, which my personal biased opinion here, the human services not-for-profits basically, that's why they're almost always forced into bankruptcy, because they're never getting paid by the city on a timely basis, and they've got to go get loans from banks to carry them over. So what would be the change there that's going to perhaps be in there?
Well, I don't think it will be, because I think they're very gun shy on doing anything on procurement. But what we recommended for IBO, and again, both the director of IBO and myself as a senior staff there, we both have significant experience in the contracting arena. When I said that contracting is mayoral and it's in the charter, one of the things the charter does is it sets up a body called the Procurement Policy Board. And that body has, it has 5 voting members, but 3 of them are appointed by the mayor and 2 of them are appointed by the controller. So guess who wins? The PPB already today has the authority to establish rules and policies that would prevent the late payment phenomenon from being allowed to continue. They could do it today. The wording in the charter today says that they are authorized to pass rules in that area. What we for IBO proposed in our testimony was that all they have to do is to change the word authorized to mandate. Because if it were required that they do something to stop that problem, then the mayor and the controller would have to come up with a way to do that, and they'd have to agree through the PPB to do it. There are lots of ways you could put much more detailed language into the charter, but given the short time frame, strategically, when we made the IBO proposal, we thought, well, let's give them an option that if they are willing to go down this road, at least accomplishes something, strengthens the hand of the controller. Already has a significant role in contracting, but not enough to stop this problem. So that was our suggestion.
And then you mentioned in your slides, and I'm sorry I couldn't access them, this idea of changing the threshold, but you didn't say from what to what. I don't think. Like, what are your dollars?
We did not take a position on exactly what. We simply said $100,000 is too small. Again, if they were interested in doing something about that, and to be clear to those who are not in the weeds with contracting, the main problem, nobody ever comes to these public hearings. I mean, literally no one. But the main issue is that having to put public notice and hold the hearing adds almost a month to what is already a very long process and creates, as you say, a lot of financial strain and in some cases bankruptcies. So we were suggesting that it be higher than 100,000. Our assumption is that a number like $1 million would make more sense. But even if they raised it to 500,000, that would make it better than what it is today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I think this is my last question. So, there's nothing in there, right, that talks about community boards and term limits and things like that.
Not in this proposal, and I didn't listen to all of the hearings, but I'm not familiar with anybody who testified on that point. That was adopted, I guess, in the last one. I did not see testimony on that point.
Okay, Erica is raising her hand saying she did, but but that's okay. I was curious because that was sort of a hot topic the last time around.
Yes.
And there's been enough time to really figure out whether that is actually, in my opinion, whether that's working or not working. But okay, well, this has been really helpful, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a few questions, and we'll go back to calling on folks. So for the first issue that you mentioned about potentially having IBO, I guess, sort of weigh in on more issues or sort of more mandated role on more things. I mean, my understanding from what you described is that basically the IBO can weigh in on anything as long as there's a request, essentially. And so I guess theoretically under the current system, as long as you received more requests for independent analyses, couldn't you sort of do more? I mean, isn't that just a sort of mechanism to have you do more analyses on more bills?
Well, there's a couple of things that in operation here. Number one, technically, we could do something that we would call a fiscal impact analysis at our own initiative or from a member of the public. It doesn't always have to be from the council. Because the council has its own finance operation and because the council has a legal requirement in the charter today that requires them to do a fiscal impact statement, it is unlikely that they feel the need for most bills to get a second opinion, essentially, which is what we would be. So the charter has this very elaborate process where a committee chair or a ranking Republican member could ask for an analysis. And we searched our records and didn't find much evidence that that had ever happened. But we do find examples where advocacy organizations or members of the council who are not the chair have asked for those types of evaluations, and we have done them. You're right that all of that could happen completely outside of a mandate. I think what was in our, sort of sights when we framed the testimony and that our director gave was the notion that, you've got this charter commission and we don't know a whole lot about what they plan to do. We realized that its purpose was basically to keep the other thing off the ballot. But then in the press release, they said they wanted to do something about fiscal impact. So to be responsive to that, and because we felt that's an area that we had a lot of expertise, we came in with some suggestions about, well, you could mandate that there would be an independent analysis, and that would be one way to get there. I don't want to get down into the weeds with you guys because it's really not your problem, but we also have a resource and budget issue for ourselves that we have to think about when we talk about, how we will carry the amount of work. So I mean, there are, I don't know, 500 bills that get introduced each year. We probably don't have the resources to analyze them all. And most of them don't have anything like a significant effect on the budget. But I think one of the reasons why we didn't, sort of haul out there and say, oh, yes, we should do an analysis of every single piece of proposed legislation is just, again, we're looking at it from the standpoint of resource allocation and what is a good use of time. And since most bills don't have and are acknowledged not to have a significant budget impact, it didn't seem that we wanted to propose that.
Okay, and so as a recommendation, I think on that subject, I mean, even for us to say something like we want it to be mandated that IBO provide an independent analysis on more bills and not even get more specific, and essentially leave the specifics up to the commission. Hopefully they, take it and do that. That's something that's still kind of advancing the ball forward potentially.
That's certainly consistent with a lot of testimony that they have heard from multiple parties.
Okay. In terms of units of appropriation, I mean, is there like a cost to having more units of appropriation? I mean, I'm just trying to understand what the sort of.
Oh, you'd probably have to have a handful of additional people at OMB to do the accounting, but it's not a lot.
So it's pretty, there's really
They
mean,
have budget codes. I mean, let's be clear. They have, when money is actually spent, they know exactly what program it's in. They just don't publish it in the budget.
right, it's just hard for the public to see it.
Correct.
And so, okay, and so they're really, I mean, what's the argument? What's the downside that people are at, if any? Is anybody saying, oh, this is why we shouldn't do this? Or
Historically, the argument is that you don't want to remove all of the flexibility from the agencies, particularly when needs are changing, from day to day, or budget realities, you've got ups and downs. But the example, again, going back to, there are probably better examples that are more, but going back to after school as an example, which is one that I'm familiar with because, I dealt with it in a past life. If you said after school has to be its own unit of appropriation, you would still be combining about 5 or 6 different DYCD programs that are all part of the after school, service delivery. And it would at least be clear to parents and to advocates how much funding that type of work is getting. You might not want to say that the middle school program has to be separately delineated from the elementary school program, and you might want to leave the agency some flexibility to move money around to meet needs between programs. But there are agencies today that literally have only 2 units of appropriation. One says personnel services and the other says non-personnel services. And everything I think the buildings department might be in that category. I mean, there are a couple of agencies where you look it up and you go, huh? But we're literally, if you're trying to see what they do, they only give you 2 categories. And that's the issue.
I can think of some other agencies in that category, but in terms of the appointment issue, which I know is not a strictly, I guess, budgetary issue, are there commissioners now, mayoral appointed commissioners, who have some sort of adjudicative role who are not subject to council approval for their appointment? Like not just people who are heading executive departments or something like that, but people who actually make make determinations about whether if there's a commission that says, oh, you violated such and such rule, or you've done X or Y. Are there any of those people?
I believe, and again, you're making me try to remember exactly what happened in 1989, and I was there, but it's hard for me to be I think that's the line that the 89 commission tried to draw. Okay. They tried to, because DOI was always subject to approval. Various boards were always subject to approval. And the big change they made in 89 is they actually made city planning commissioners subject to approval, even if they were being appointed by multiple officials, but all of them needed council approval to get onto the planning commission. But they specifically in 89 made a big point out of saying they did not want the executive agencies to have to be confirmed by the council. And they recognized even back then that is against the practice of the federal government. Does have the head of, different department heads are approved by Congress, but they specifically chose not to do that. And the first example of a change in the opposite direction was the one, I think it's 2019, when Corp Counsel was put into that category. And Corp Counsel doesn't have an adjudicative role per se. They do have the legal obligation to represent both mayoral and non-mayoral agencies. And I think that was the justification that the council gave for saying it was only fair that if they were going to be required, if non-mayoral agencies and non-mayoral elected officials are required to use Corp Counsel as their lawyer, then they ought to have a voice. That was, I think, their argument. And it did pass, but no other commissioner, to my knowledge, is subject to that approval.
So just going back to, understood. Going back to units of appropriation. So like what's preventing, if any, is the council currently able to just create new units of appropriation that would be clear And so yeah.
Yes, and each budget year they try to, I mean, if you look at they can do two things. They can do what's called a term and condition, where they basically pass the budget with enough sort of rules around it that sometimes say you have to send us monthly reports telling us exactly what you spent on, this, that, and the other. And they can require the administration to create new units of appropriation. Yes, they have that power. I think it is, again, it just becomes one more thing that they are struggling for in what is a very condensed time frame as they review the executive budget, and they're making choices on what they can, afford to do in that time frame or not. And so, yes, they could, and certainly if you go back 35 years to when the language first got into the charter, the council could have been more aggressive at insisting that units of appropriation be more logical and understandable than they are today. The thought was that it can be done in charter language as well.
I guess that's, yeah. So then, I mean, if this gets done as part of a charter revision, who decides what the new units of appropriation are as part of that? Because it seems like it's too specific for the actual charter, itself to say, oh, these are what the units of appropriation are going to be from now on, or whatever. So, I mean, what sort of specific is the form that the revision would take?
Kind of like everything else in the budget, it would become it ends up being a proposal that comes from the administration and is reviewed and adopted by the council. I can think of extreme situations where perhaps somebody could litigate the issue as well, but a lot of what happens, think of the charter, I think as Sherry pointed out, it's the Constitution. So a lot of the language is just general. And the idea is if that language could be strengthened and if it could be clearer that what you're supposed to be doing there is making it transparent to the voter, to the public, how their funds are being used to support understandable parts of city government that they as a consumer know, then perhaps the charter language could be tightened and it would matter. But you're right, it is also possible that they could tighten the language and the same thing could happen and life would go on for another 30 years before anybody thought about it.
Okay, so like a change would be something like units of appropriation shall be specific enough for the public to be able to XYZ. I mean, something like that. And then they interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the language now, Tina, I don't know if you were able to, I don't remember what section of the budget
It's in the
provision.
chat.
Okay.
Yeah,
if you look at the language now, it does say programmatic or purpose, I think, and it's the purpose language that's being stretched more than anything else. But so you could just take that sentence and say, program as understood, by the public or something in that.
All right. Well, I mean, we don't have to come up. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. That is a big help. All right.
Russell, I think we need to figure out what role would we play on this if the written testimony has to be there by Friday. Our board meeting isn't until the following Wednesday. So we obviously have no authorization to say anything on behalf. So what are your thoughts on how we can have input?
So yeah, personally, I mean, this is what I've said before. I think first of all, we can ask for them to give us more time, whether we can get that or not. But I mean, I do think that's a reasonable request, particularly again, if a lot of other community boards are in the same boat and they're asking for that. That's number one. Number two, I believe we can send in, instances where it's sort of warranted, we can send committee resolutions that aren't full board resolutions. We can send committee resolutions and say, look, we don't have time yet to do a full board resolution on something, but in the, time we've had, here's what our committee has said on it. And, they can sort of take that for what it's worth. And then I guess, yeah, so then I'm trying to, sorry. So
we have seven board members on this call.
I mean, the other thing is, they're making the report on the 25th.
That's their public. They have to vote on it. Yeah.
So look, I mean, we will, even though technically, let's say, okay, the deadline for submitting written testimony is this Friday, and they're not voting until the 25th. If we pass a board resolution on the 17th, we can still send it to them, and they can say, oh, sorry, you're past the deadline, we're not going to look at this. But again, like, they'll still have it before they're doing something on the 25th. So, they're not great options really, but I think that's the best we can do. And I think it makes sense for us to at least try to work
Val,
this out.
what do you think of that? Valerie, how do you think we should proceed?
Proceed in terms of the.
So she meant, she's talking
That,
about.
no, Valerie may, our chair.
That's
our
okay.
leader,
That's
our-
okay, Valerie. I do it every time Marla asked you to do something. I was jumping, saying, "What am I supposed to do?" So, look, that's the only thing we can do. I mean, I don't know what kind of resolution we can make here tonight, but to Russell's point, I don't think that it's going to. If we're 2 days late. Given the process, at least we'd be on the record if we had something we wanted to say. Tomorrow actually is an emergency borough board meeting regarding City of Yes housing, because the borough board hasn't taken a position on it either. So I could bring this up at the end of that meeting to just say if there's any groundswell about asking them to extend the time for people to comment. I mean, honestly, one of the things I would want to change in the charter is that you can't do like things like this over the summer, to be honest with you. That would be like, to me, this is how government gets done in New York. Everything gets done, starting June 25th when everybody's not around or not paying attention. But that's a little bit of a sideline. I think Russell and Shari, that's the way we can do it. If there's some kind of resolution we want to pass tonight, I mean, we can put that on our agenda for the next full board meeting and take our chances.
I would hope so. Well, let's try and get through the rest of the questions here. And if Marla and Tina and Val, if you guys have a time that you have to leave, let us know, because but we do have some more questions if you're able to stay longer.
Wendy has had her hand up for a while.
Yeah, let's go to Wendy. Wendy, you there?
Yeah, Wendy, you should. There you go.
Yep, she's got it.
There we go. There we go. Thanks so much. Soviet technology, what can I say? I want to thank you for a great presentation. And there was a small item that you mentioned having to do with film permitting, but I don't want to gloss over the change in possible administration of that, because it does, just the permitting alone generates some significant funds for whatever office administration to have a revitalized film industry here in New York. The governor has says she's dedicating funds for that. And we lost 25 to 30% of our industry post-COVID, and it's been gained right now by New Jersey, having formed sound studios in the former Fort Monmouth area, and it's also been picked up by Georgia and Arizona. So it's pretty significant. It's 185,000 jobs, direct jobs in the industry, and all the ancillary businesses that, the dry cleaners, the bodegas, whatever, that services production. And I think that you had said that it was going to be leaving MOM, the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and going to a small business.
No.
It was on your slide. Was it the way around?
Yes. First of all, what I gave you on that slide is just a list of what city agencies themselves have proposed. This is not an IBO proposal. These were city agency proposals that were given to the commission, and I flagged them in case, again, they're any of interest to the board, because the fact that they come from the mayoral administration itself means that they might have some traction and they might happen. But in fact, that proposal, it's the opposite of what you suggest. Right now, the permits that they need are being issued, I think, by small business or by some agency that is not the media office. And so the requirement, the proposal.
When I just Googled it, it said that it was MOM.
He's Mom, it must be employee of SBS, but they didn't make any recommendation.
No, they want it to be theirs. Essentially, in both cases, the same thing with the waterfront property one. The agency that is complaining about it is saying we should be doing the permits, not them.
Right,
Do
but
you
And
have
again,
any
I
thoughts
don't
on
have
what the
expertise.
implications are in the change of
I just
administration?
copied what they had.
and I'm looking at the preliminary report, there's no recommendation on that area. They discuss it and they say what should be done, but then they don't recommend that it be done, so.
Yeah, they just say this is what city agencies have recommended. They don't say that the staff is recommending that to the
Yeah.
commission. Again, it might be something that's not happening at all. I flagged it because it has sort of a tie to the administration and could happen.
I appreciate that you flagged it. Thank you so much. A bit confusing.
All right, let's go next to Judy Schneider.
I may be too early, Russell. If we're putting a resolution together, I have something.
Sorry, it is too
I
early for
wanna
that
say.
to stick to questions.
Okay.
We'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, Michelle.
Thanks, Russell. Is it a requirement to procure a vendor? Is the city required to put it out to bid?
Okay. Remember I talked about state law? There's a thing called General Municipal Law 103 and 104 that actually operate as a very tight restriction on how the city can do contracts. And this will sound ridiculous when I tell it to you, but what it really amounts to is a grandfathering provision based on 1953. So the city can use any procurement method it wants to find a vendor, as long as some form of that procurement method was being used in 1953. That's what the law says. It's silly. But so the answer is for many, many kinds of work, there is a requirement for a competitive bid or for what's called a competitive proposal, which is slightly different than a bid because price is not the determining factor. But the city tries to do more creative and one would argue more modern ways of contracting, but there's a lot of pushback from vendors and there's a lot of litigation in this area and the city's hands are quite tied.
I ask because it's come to my attention. I believe that one of the contracts that was awarded to put not the 5G towers, but the pods, I believe that contract never went out to bid. I'm not sure that the 5G one did either. But I ask whether or not that's the case because that's something being imposed by the whole city. And it's a contract that the city signed, which obligates them to spend this money. And yet we don't know that it's a valid thing. It doesn't really provide the connect, but I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, we're getting pretty far afield. I'm not sure that's technically a procurement. It might be a franchise or a concession. I don't know.
Oh, well, then how is that defined? And then I guess the question for you at this meeting is how is that defined, but also whether or not that's an issue that we should bring to the table. Should we address that?
They've pretty
I mean, we'd have
clearly
to have the
indicated
1953
that they have
law
they
to understand.
Yeah, that's state law. Look, reforming procurement law is a really complicated topic, and no one is going to be able to do it, this commission or anybody else, in 3 weeks. It involves a lot of different state law provisions, a very robust number of charter provisions, and a whole book of rules. Obviously, if you already had a position on some major procurement issue, you could bring it to them and put it in the record, but the chances of them doing something on procurement, I would say, are very slim.
So that being the case, is there a time frame with which charter provisions or charter revisions are addressed? I really thought the last time we did the charter revision, I thought it wasn't up again for like 10 years. So when I heard about this, I was just, really, isn't it too soon?
They could do it
Do it
every
every
year
year.
if they wanted to.
But it's whenever, can do next year, whatever. Okay,
Mhm.
then, and to that point, then my next question, maybe it's a fool's errand, but you mentioned Gail Brewer being very conversant in this. Gail also took a very, very strong position in opposition to the suggestion that was on the last time on the ballot about community board term limits. And she sort of vowed that when she went back to the council, that she was going to do what she could to reverse that position in the charter. Is that a valid thing to go after now? Or if it was just a couple of years ago, would they not put it on the ballot because here it was just voted on? Or does it make sense to go after it? Or what's your thought?
You're
Or
really
ask
asking
Gail?
a political question, and you have as much expertise in that arena as we do. I mean, that's a politics question. There's no legal reason why they could put something on the ballot that just went. In fact, I think when they tried to do nonpartisan elections, they did it 2 or 3 years in a row before they stopped doing it. But you could put something on the ballot. You could have a charter commission multiple times. That I don't think there's a requirement, but whether they would do that, whether it makes sense to do that, that's really a political question.
All right, well, maybe this committee would consider reaching back out to Gail Brewer. It's off, it's an opportunity,
It's
let's put it
something,
that
yeah,
way, but
we
I'll
can do
just
whatever
let
we
that
want.
go.
Gail is testifying today at the hearing that is today. I happen to have run into her earlier today, and she is testifying today.
All right, Ed, your next question.
Yeah, so thanks, Russell. I just had a question about timing again, and again, no, you just our hands being tied, if you will, on the 25th. There's just a certain march of time, trying to be redundant, procedure you have to follow here, right? I mean, in terms of getting this on the ballot, being printed, voting, that kind of thing. Like, I know we're going to ask for time, but I guess my point is, and maybe to Judy's thing down the road is, it is, for lack of a better term, adjective, annoying, not to be able to have a more, shall we say, robust, fulsome discussion of some of these topics that you raise, which are important. The procurement one, that sounds like that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other commission. But
That was 9 years of my life.
right. You never get those back. But I was just going to say, in terms of some of the other topics, it is just sad and that we can't bring up the term limits or the nonpartisan elections or anything related to that because, like you said, we have to have this to you by a certain date. And I guess my question is, what are those dates again? What are those dates again? Sorry, again, I wasn't here at the beginning for it, but we have the 25th. But after that, how does it flow after that?
Goes right to, they have to vote on it on the 25th, and they have to give it to the clerk by August 5th. It's all done by August 5th.
But what's the source of those deadlines?
Is that to get the ballot out for people to vote, right? It has to go overseas and all that, right?
Yes.
That's what it is. The overseas ballot. That's what it is. You have to send these.
Deadline is the August 5th one. The question of I think the 25th may be a Friday. I don't remember, but what they're trying to do is to give themselves enough room so that the lawyers can vet the language. They have to, because I'm not sure the commission has to vote on the exact ballot language. I'm not sure if they do. I think they might vote on the concept and then the ballot language gets done later, or I'm not sure. But in any case, there's a lot of lawyering that happens between the vote and the decision to put it on the ballot and sort of divvying it up into specific proposals. And that's why it can't be vote on August 4th. Now, is there wiggle room between the 25th and August 5th that they could squish it a little bit? I don't know, but it's not in anybody here. It's not in our control because that would be between them and their lawyers to decide what to do.
Right, and so that leads me to another question, and it reminds me of one. It seems to me in one of these things that we voted on recently, didn't they, as the lawyers, they have a provision that you have to put it in just much more simple language. For lawyers, we get so caught up in writing and it's not very well for general consumption. But isn't there a provision that we voted on that these referendums, people's eyes glaze over when they read them? So wasn't there something that was passed or something that there's something that has to be on the ballot as well? Maybe that's what has to be lawyered as well, as there's just
Yeah,
that
I'm not
basically says this
familiar.
is the basic thrust of that or something.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I do know that the city clerk spends a lot of time and resources on the question of what the question is, right? Again, I'm trying to think of where there would be a source of information that's accessible to you. I might suggest the Lawyers Alliance. They might have something that they would know on this topic. I don't know if they've published on it recently, but there are, there are definitely advocacy groups that probably have looked at that in the past.
Right. No, it's fine. I know we did. I'm just trying to remember when and where I saw it. That's all. That's no big deal. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So I think that is all of the questions that we had. So yeah, so Marla and Tina and Valerie, you guys are certainly welcome to stick around for our discussion, but you're also free to go. And your presentation was extremely helpful. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yes.
You're very welcome. I think I will leave, but you know where to find us, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks everyone. Yeah,
Needed.
take care. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.
All right. So Sherry, here's my thought, and you tell me what you think of this. What I would sort of like to do is use the presentation to sort of guide our thinking about this and what I think we can do. I mean, ultimately, I think we're going to be pretty limited in terms of, being able to pass resolutions and so on some of the stuff, but I think we should try. And I think, part of this is going to be that we should sort of pick our battles a little bit. And I don't think we need to pass a recommendation on every single subject that we've discussed here tonight. But I think maybe what we can do is just sort of run down them in the order that they appear in the presentation and try and get a sort of sense of whether, I think if something is very hotly contested, maybe we would just sort of skip it. I think if there's a sort of clear consensus on something, we can do it. If there's something that people just feel like is over their heads and we don't want to get into it, we can just sort of move on and not get into it. But basically just sort of try and essentially sort of do it that way and try and do as many of these as we think we can manage.
As good as any way. I mean, because as you and I said, if we look at the preliminary report, most of the topics that they did write on, they said we need to research more, so they didn't do recommendations. I think whatever their recommendations are, frankly, is what's going to be on the ballot. I hate to be so negative, but I frankly thought this report was done even before they had the public hearings, just the way it's written. So yeah,
well, I think that can inform what we decide to do or not do also, but I don't think it necessarily needs to limit us, but I think it definitely weighs sort of in favor of, probably makes sense to do more of the stuff that they're actually going to deal with. But so we did get the presentation from Tina, so I'll just ask Will to put it up if you can, please.
Okay, let me get that downloaded and set up. Meaning you have a couple of minutes before I bring up it.
Okay. I guess why don't we, Michelle, do you have like a sort of organizational question, or it's about a specific issue?
I'd like to make a resolution that we support, however you want to do the wording, the more specific wording of the units of appropriation. And I think with all that was said, you could probably devise the whereases. But I from my sense of it is I think, well, I'll make the resolution. That's the resolution. If seconded, I'll speak to it.
Now, well, we're gonna do a whole list, so.
Yeah, but you'd have to
but
do
I
them
think-
in separate resolutions.
I think that may be
Because-
right. Well, yeah, I think maybe
You know what I
separate.
mean? They're not going to
Because then you're-
appear. It has to be in separate resolution.
I
So
like the idea of doing separate resolutions. I agree with you. So I would, and it looks like Ed, I can't tell if Ed is seconding or
okay.
if that's just his hand up. I mean, I'll second it anyway. So
Oh, yeah. Well, so anyway, the point is, I got the sense that the group would certainly be in favor of that. And given the fact that that Marla acknowledged and stated that it's difficult for the public to look at the appropriations for individual items. So given that, I mean, this would be like voting for apple pie. I think however you want to do the whereases and frame the resolution, Russell and Sherry, I'll leave it to the attorneys, but that's my resolution.
So let me just suggest a friendly amendment, because one of the things that, so the community board budget is broken down by personnel and non-personnel. And I happen to think that in the context of the community board, that level of specificity is appropriate. And I don't think I would actually want it to be more specific, but I do agree with you more broadly that it makes sense in the context of these big programs and departments that Marla was talking about. So what my friendly amendment would be that we specify for, either we specify that we're talking about city departments, or we specify that it's not going to apply to community boards or something to that effect. But basically, I would just want something in there about that, because I don't want.
First of all, if you say city agencies, doesn't that
I think that might include us.
So we are a city agency, Michelle.
So it would have to be
we're classified as a
so you could
city
say
agency?
mayoral agencies, maybe.
I like that. Yes.
Or you could say city agencies with a budget over $1.5 million, or something like that.
Oh, that would be great. Well, all right. Well, which I'll.
Well, which do you
I would
think
do that.
would be
I would do
most,
that. I would do the.
Which do you think would be most inclusive in terms of being open without ensnaring the community board in that net?
To me,
would
it's
it be
budget.
mayoral agencies, or would it be defining it by money?
I think it's the threshold. I think it's the money threshold. You're going to catch. If you limit
Where
it by.
do you catch more?
Yeah, I think you will catch more in the requirement to be more specific with a monetary threshold and get more of what you're trying to get and leave out more.
Okay, then that's fine. And what monetary threshold do you suggest?
Why don't we just do 2 million?
I would say an operating budget, so that it's not including rent.
Great. Okay. So why don't we say operating budget over 2 million has to have,
And are we sure that that includes a lot of the entities that we want to include?
I think so.
I don't know what everybody's budget is. I
can't
don't
imagine
know.
there's a lot of like substantial agencies out there that have budgets lower than 2 million. You know what I mean? Like, let's really think about it. I mean, if you think every mayoral agency, I'm sure, is going to have a higher budget than that. I mean, I think, I feel like we'll be in pretty good shape if we do that.
Not 1.5, as Will suggested.
Oh, I just threw a number out. I think Russell's probably in the right ballpark that you're going to see a chasm between community board budgets as like some of the smallest city agencies, and the next rung up above it. And I would say you'd want to give yourself plenty of flexibility in case there's ever a budget increase for community boards.
That's what I was worried about. Yeah, exactly.
Down the road.
Okay. All right, that makes sense to me. So you have the whereases, you can write that up. And if somebody wants to, well, discussion or call the question or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's right. So look, there's a resolution on the floor. I think if it's something that there's a lot of consensus on, we can just call it, or if someone wants to, Judy.
I'll call it. I think we're in agreement.
Is there a second?
Russell, I think you called on me. One of the items
I thought
on
you called the question.
Pardon?
You called the question on the resolution.
No, I didn't. I was raising my hand to ask a question.
Oh, sorry. I thought I heard somebody.
It was Sherry. I
got it. Well, let's go to
Okay.
Judy first, and then we'll
Yes, because I said before that I had a question when
Yeah.
it came to the resolution. Near the bottom of what Will sent us was that they want to tie the Citizen Review Commission to the NYPD. Can we make an addition?
That was the city council president's recommendation.
Right. Can we further enhance that recommendation as part of our resolution?
So we're going to do what we decided to do, I think, first of all, with separate resolutions on each sort of item. So instead of an omnibus resolution, we want to just have multiple small resolutions to make it easier for people to vote. So if they oppose one thing, they don't have to vote against the whole resolution.
Oh, okay. So then
So we'll take that up later.
line again.
The other thing is, yeah, and I'll just to add briefly to that, it's not, I think that's one of the issues that the city council speaker wanted addressed, but I don't think it's necessarily in what the Charter Revision Commission is proposing. So we can certainly have a resolution on that.
Yes, because I have an issue with that I think needs to be brought to the council's attention. Even if they don't act on it, it's time to act on it. So when you get to that point, you'll let me know. You'll call on me again and I'll give you my thoughts.
Sure. All right. So let's, why don't we go back to the Michelle's resolution about the units of appropriation and making those more specific. And I think Sherry called the question. Is there a second on calling the question? Michelle, good. Is anyone opposed to calling the question? Is anyone opposed to the resolution? Raise your hand if you're a board member. All right, so that passes. Just start the list here.
Yeah, and just for the video record, it's Russell, Sherry, Barbara Rudder, Ed, Judy, and Michelle and Valerie.
Okay, why don't we go to you, Judy, and you can make your proposal on the CCRB issue you were talking about.
My issue, and I've been bringing this up for years to various elected people and in the council, is that the Citizen Review Complaint Board, I have no problem with it being tied to the New York Police Department because that's what it's all about. But those people that serve on the board should take the course that the police department offers for 13 weeks. Both Barry and I did that and know about how the police department functions before they vote on somebody's innocence or guilt in a situation. They really, none of us, until Barry and I went to that course, really knew about citizens training. And this is 13 weeks. We went one Wednesday night for 3 hours, and we really learned how the police department functioned, how it was trained. And I think the people who are on the CCRB need to take that course if they're going to serve on that board and do a good job for the public.
Well, here, let me just give my reaction to that and see what you think is basically, I think unless there's a city charter requirement that police take that course, I wouldn't necessarily think
no, this is the course the police take, and what they've done is shorten it for people like us or citizen review people to get the whole 6-month police course of how they're trained in 13 Wednesday nights.
I understand that, but I think unless the charter itself, not just city law, unless the city charter is spelling out what the training course is supposed to be for the police, I wouldn't necessarily want the charter to have requirements about what the CCB does. And what I would add is
the course does spell that out.
That's in the charter.
Judy, are you sure it's not the administrative code? Because those are separate.
It's a legislative issue, because this sounds more like a legislative change. But the other point that I would make is, I think to the extent that you're concerned or have reservations, or I mean, I personally don't think it makes sense to tie the CCRB budget to the police budget, because I just think they're distinct. And if somebody wants to raise the CCRB budget, it can be proposed and voted on or whatever. I mean, I don't think that's a good idea either. But what I would say is, I think we can I don't think that's in the Charter Revision Commission's recommendations. So to the extent that it's not coming out, I think we could just not take it up. And if we want to take it up, we could also just say we don't want that to be part of the charter revision. So I don't think we're limited to sort of assuming that that's going to be in there the way that it's been described as the council wanting it, and trying to sort of tweak it. I think we could just, frankly, just not even get into it if it's not going to be included, or just be more forceful in saying we don't agree with that.
Okay, I have no problem with the money point of view. My point of view is trying to get these people to understand how the police are trained and what they are capable of doing and not doing. And taking this course will tell them that, so that when they have a case in front of them, they'll have a better understanding of how the police force functions. And if this isn't the right place to do it, then maybe Russell or Will, you can point us in a direction where we can get this done, because I really think this is a very important issue.
Yeah, Judy, sorry. I think you're right that it's an important issue, but this is not, we can discuss offline where I think this could probably be better advocated, but I don't think that this is a city charter revision commission sort of discussion.
Okay,
so that's my
all right.
That's sort of my gut also.
Okay, fine. I accept that. And yeah, let's talk about it offline. And it's certainly worth pursuing.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it just sounds like more of a sort of city policy issue, and something that doesn't, I mean, even if nothing related to that happens in the charter revision process, which it seems like is what is going to happen, it may be something that we want to recommend as just a sort of city requirement.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Michelle, go ahead, Michelle.
So I'd like to make a resolution that we are opposed to the Civilian Complaint Review Board's budget be combined with the police budget. So Judy is seconding that, I think, with her thumbs up. Now, I absolutely agree with her, and I would like to see us in whatever format, whatever committee is appropriate on this board, to get those that are on the complaint review board to have to take that course. So I would support that. If it's not an appropriate place to put it here, but I would just say that I certainly don't want to see any money taken from the police department. If they have to absorb the review board, that will not necessarily guarantee an increase in funding. So I would not want to see any monies taken away from the NYPD. So that's why I'm proposing the resolution that does not happen.
Valerie, go ahead.
So wait, but that's not real. So that's really only the recommendation of Adrian Adams, right? That's not the recommendation of the commission.
No.
So I mean, the
I mean, we
chances
can-
of that happening are pretty slim and none, since the mayor has proposed this to, if you want, block whatever it is that the city council wants to do. Am I misreading that, Russell? I mean, that's really what's happening here.
I mean, I think well, look, I think we have the ability to sort of to weigh in on whatever we want. Now, theoretically, I mean, again, I don't think, given that the charter revision, given that it's not in their report, I don't think it's very likely that that recommendation is going to go through. At the same time, I don't think there's anything preventing them from doing it. And so theoretically, we could still weigh in on anything that's sort of on anybody's radar. I do think that's conceivable.
Okay.
So
but
I don't think it's
guess-
like completely out of order. I think there's a question of like, you know, I do think there's a degree to which we want to sort of spend our time in this meeting on things that are sort of more likely to happen. Although
I guess that's where I'm going here, because I think we should be more, and maybe others can disagree, we should be more reacting to what the proposal is on the table, which is what the mayor is proposing. Because everybody from the IBO to Adrian Adams and the city council is going to have their recommendation. So we can't be, maybe.
I mean, I'm inclined to vote on this just because, well, I don't know. I happen to agree with it, but so.
Well, I guess I just fear that in taking a position either on the council's sort of reaction to what the mayor is doing without enough real in the weeds of what the actual proposal is, that we'll be siding with one side or the other with not really having the full information on what the proposal actually is. Like,
look, I think that's, yeah, I mean, fair enough. I think that sort of cuts two ways. I think we could either just sort of take this up, and I think if you think that we just shouldn't weigh in on it, that's enough of a reason to vote against the resolution, as if you actually oppose the resolution on the merits. That's sort of option one. I think option two is if we have a sort of two-step process where we kind of like vote on whether to even take a position on an issue, and then only if we sort of have a kind of I don't know, like a critical mass of people who actually want us to do that, do we then take a vote on it? So those seem to me to be the sort of two possibilities. But I do think we have, and I don't know what you think, Sherry, but at some level we have a sort of motion on the floor that that's out there.
what's the exact motion on the floor, Russell? I'm sorry, just.
Basically, the community board aid opposes linking the CCRB budget to the NYPD budget. I think that's really it.
I don't think it's, in my opinion, I don't think it's major enough, and it was only the speaker's recommendation. I mean, that's like one, we don't even have sort of like a COIHO here where we have 15 proposals that we know what, up, down on each one. I mean, we're sort of reacting.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the problem with this whole process, right? That it is the entire city charter is up for grabs in this process. The commission can do whatever they want on the charter. I mean, that's just how it is. So, I mean, to me, the guardrails are basically, I mean, I agree that I don't think we want to just have anything out there sort of
just
willy-nilly, because we have the whole charter on the agenda. But I think what I think are the sort of bounds, and I would actually ask Will to go to the next page of the presentation. Next one. Yes, here. One back. I mean, starting basically, I think anything that was presented on, I think is something that we should sort of think about whether or not we want to do something on it. And some of them I think we'll skip, but I think certainly those are all sort of fairly on the table. And I also think probably things that were in the list that we put on the website of sort of the items that Sherry mentioned as being something that City Council Speaker, I personally would say that, like, theoretically the City Council Speaker's advocacy could cause the Charter Revision Commission to want to weigh in on it or whatever between now and what they do. So to me, it's it's enough to kind of allow us to take a position on it if we want to.
So what are you saying? You want to take a vote?
I think, I think if someone wants to call the question, or if there's more debate on the merits of it, or whatever, I think we can.
How many are you going to go through now?
I mean, I want to do these quickly. I mean, the thing is,
Okay.
I think a lot of these we can do. Again, I mean, my goal here is to say, let's sort of stick to ones that we really feel strongly about. Let's stick to ones that we feel like we definitely sort of understand. Let's stick to ones that we feel like there's a pretty strong consensus, because you're right. But I think it may be possible to get through a number of these quickly, potentially.
Okay, well, I think that, okay, that's fine. I don't want to hold it up, but all I would say is that whatever resolution we put together, I would be in favor at the outset of just saying, we think that this is being done way too quickly. And we think that both sides, whether it would be a city council proposal or a mayoral proposal, at this point, with the election in November, that this is not the way that charter revisions should be accomplished. But be that as it may, we're not going to forgo our opportunity to weigh in on what we're hearing are the proposals and then go into whatever it is you want to do. So
I would put that, I mean, I would put that basically, I mean, we'll probably have one cover letter for all of these. So I think if you
okay.
cover letter or something, that's fine.
All right, I have one that they actually made a recommendation
Well,
on.
wait a minute, wait, Sherry, because we still have, there's a
haven't
resolution.
voted. All right.
Yeah, there's a resolution on the floor. So why don't we'll do yours next.
Okay.
So before I go back to Michelle, I just want to go to Ed.
Thanks, Russell. I'm glad you did. I just had a question on the CCRB, and I think whether we voted on it or not, but as I understood, and I may be wrong, so please correct me here, that the reason they tied it together was the speaker Adams thought that they're never going to cut the police budget, but they might, increase the cop budget and then, cut the CCRB budget. So I guess her idea was to tie them together. I guess that they would go up together at a certain percentage. I guess my question is do I have that correct? And then second of all, I agree wholeheartedly with what Valerie said. And however we vote, and I'll do it, however you want to do it. But I'm just going to say that I'm going to be a no for all of these. And I'll tell you straight up, I won't be redundant. The reason I'll be voting against all of these is exactly the reasons that Valerie outlined before, which is I just, sort of a protest vote. Is like you're putting this in front of us, you're giving us 32 nanoseconds to look at it. How can we really have any kind of real consideration of it? So I'll just be voting against it rather than abstain, which I know everybody gets upset about. And if you have any info on the CCRB, that would be great. Or I don't know.
Well, yeah. So I mean, in terms of, I don't necessarily know any more about it than you do. I mean, I think, you're sort of, do I specifically know what the motivations behind it are? No, I suspect that your description of them is correct. But in terms of like specifically just what it actually does, my understanding is that it operates as basically saying, right, as you've said, that like the CCRB budget is going to be a percentage, and like as the police department budget goes up, the CCRB budget goes up. As the police department budget theoretically goes down, the CCRB budget would go down, et cetera. Yeah, so that's how I understand it operating. Okay. What I would say just briefly to your broader point is I think, look, let's, we have a lot of frustrations as a community board with how some of these things are done and the lack of input and whatever. I always sort of feel like let's take the opportunities we have to do as much as we can, even if it's not much. And as a practical point, and to take this very resolution as an example, this is a resolution where we're saying we don't want a change to the charter effectively. And so technically, if you vote against this resolution, you're actually not voting against, as a sort of blanket matter, any changes that may come down the pike, through this messed up process.
I'm not voting for any changes. Yeah, because I don't want any changes to the charter under these.
But that's what I'm saying. This particular resolution is saying no change. So if you vote against it, you are voting against.
Oh, that is what we're voting against. No change. Okay, then I'm for that. That's where we're at.
Yeah, so that's why you may want to just consider it one.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. Okay, cool. Then I'm for that.
We're saying we don't want to implement that change in the charter.
Yeah.
Did you say Judy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Call the
Judy.
question.
All right, let's go. Since it's Michelle's resolution, I want to go. Oh, Michelle's seconding. So why don't we just do that? Anyone opposed to calling the question? No. Anyone opposed to this resolution? No.
Hey,
Wait. Give them a chance to raise their hands.
You're right.
Raise your hand if you're opposed to the resolution.
Sherry, you're voting no on this one?
yeah, on the police, I don't think we should include it. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Valerie. Valerie, would you just support that so that it's
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a no.
Okay. I would just request that, as per our usual practice, please do raise your hand with the icon as opposed to just doing it on the camera.
Oh, well.
All right. Well, look, what I would really like to do.
Wait, Ed, are you voting? Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say sorry, Russell. It's all the double negatives. My brain is a little gooey. So on this one with the CCRB, the president. Sorry.
The resolution is we oppose linking the CCRB budget to the police budget.
Oh, I'm for that. So I guess I'm voting no then for our resolution for that.
You're voting yes
okay.
on the resolution.
No, I'm voting against our resolution. I'm okay with them being linked together. So I
fine.
guess I'm
okay, correct.
No.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're voting.
I'm voting against no on our resolution then.
Got it. Okay, so I don't even know if it passes, but I'm sure.
So actually, Sherry and Valerie and Ed are no's.
Right.
Russell, were you a no?
No, I voted yes.
Okay, then it passes with Barbara, you, Judy, Michelle in the affirmative.
All right. What I would like to do is really try and stick to just try and kind of run through these. And again, like we don't have to take a position on each of these, but just on the first one, you know, this was one of the sort of main things that Marla was talking about, if we have a view on it. And again, I think if we feel like it's over our head or not something we feel strongly about, we can pass over it. But if we could potentially please just talk about this first item on this list, on this slide. I'll go to Michelle.
I do have a comment about this, but I wanted to make one suggestion, Russell. If we can, and now I can't do it, but in order to differentiate between the no vote as a proposal because we're opposing the process and the no vote on a specific resolution, if we can turn the process and everything that Valerie said into a resolution that we're not happy about this and the whole thing in a resolution, vote on that so that we're on record that we oppose this whole process. And then as we go to item by item, the vote will be pure in that it will represent an individual's position on the item and not on the process. Now
Michelle, wasn't that the whereases that everyone was talking about earlier?
I mean, my understanding, yeah, I don't think we need a resolution for that because I think it can be included in the cover letter. But I think
that's what I was going to say is turn the cover letter into a resolution so that there's no confusion as people vote tonight, because there are people that might want to just vote no on something. They may agree with it, but they're opposing the process. So if we turn that whole cover letter into a resolution, it'll be clear where we stand on the process. And even in that commentary, you did say we're only taking a position because we are forced to, or we're taking advantage of the opportunity to take a position, but we are opposed to the process and the time frame and basically the points that Valerie outlined. I think that'll take the confusion out of the upcoming votes.
All right. So I think, does someone want to make a resolution to that?
Well, can I suggest something, Russell? Yes. If anybody is opposed to including that as like a cover letter or the whereases for all of the resolutions, then raise their hand now. Otherwise, we don't need to vote on it. We can just move on to the actual substantive conversation.
If you're including it in every resolution in the whereases, that's fine. That wasn't the impression that I got. The impression that I got is it was going to be a cover letter attached to all of the resolutions.
That's
If
what I
you think
contemplated, but
it's
if
more efficient to put it into every single resolution, that's fine, as long as it gets stated and that people know that we're not confusing opposition to the process with opposition to the item. However you want to do that, as long
that's
as
fine.
it's
I'm happy to, personally, I'm fine with both. So that's, yeah, if that speeds things along, I think that's fine. Let's just add it as a whereas, and we'll also put it in the cover letter. Assuming Valerie's okay with that on the cover letter side.
Okay.
All right, well, look, so we'll do that. I think, you know, on this one, I think what the IBO is asking for is essentially including, you know, requiring independent analysis from the IBO more frequently. And I think given the, you know, one of the things I think to sort of keep in mind here is that, you know, our feedback, I think, can be fairly general on some of these. And I don't think we necessarily have to sort of spell out where we want the line to be in terms of how often the IBO weighs in or whatever. I think that, frankly, I wouldn't feel qualified to be able to define that. But I think if we think there's value to the IBO weighing in on more items, we could have a resolution to that effect. And if people don't feel strongly about it, I'm also fine to move on this one. So I don't know what folks think. Michelle.
So I'd like to make a resolution that we support the IBO having input on proposals. I don't know how you want to make the generalization. What do you want? You want to
I think
say
just even to say something like on more proposals, that there be a, you know, the threshold be set so that the IBO is required to weigh in on.
Is there a monetary set on it now? There's
No, I
nothing
don't think
in
it's
the
done on
charter
monetary
now.
basis. No,
So, and you don't want to put a monetary value on it.
I don't think so. I think I would rather have it be sort of
So
categorical.
increase input. I think.
Yeah, that it be mandated basically for more things.
Yeah. So second, anybody?
But use the term they use to add value in the fiscal impact analysis.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. So resolution for the IBO to be mandated to add value by being mandated in more of these, you know, on more bills. And I'll just call the question because I see no other hands up. Michelle second. So is anyone opposed to voting on this? Is anyone opposed to this resolution? Okay. All right, raise the threshold for when public hearings are required on contracts. Right now it's $100,000. I think we could just say we want the threshold raised. We could say that we want a particular number. We could say nothing if we're happy leaving it the way it is, which I sort of, anyway, yeah, what do people think? I'm gonna go to, I can't tell if Ed is raising his hand because it's a different icon.
I'm not seeing a raised hand for Ed.
Got it. Okay, so we'll go to Michelle.
So I'd like to make a resolution that I don't know how you want to word it, do not raise the threshold. I think $100,000 is fine. I would like to see more input from the public, more hearings on what they sign. I've seen so many unbelievable problems with the contracts that the city is signing. So you could put the whereases in there or whatever.
Okay, so basically we want no change.
Right.
Is there a second? I'll second.
Barbara Ritter.
Okay. All right. It would be in order for someone to call the question on this in light of the absence of comment on it.
Michelle has her hand up to call it. Yeah. Second.
All right. It's been seconded. Is anyone opposed to calling the question on this? Is anyone opposed to this item, this resolution? Okay. Can you go to the next page, please? Tighten language and unit appropriation, we did that. Limit the duration of emergency contracts to 2 years. I don't know. What do people think?
I think that's a good idea.
I agree. You
Because
want to make a
emergency
resolution?
contracts typically do not go through the usual award of contract process.
Okay. So you want to make a resolution?
I make a resolution that that the duration of emergency contracts are limited to 2 years.
Is there a second?
Barbara seconded it.
All right. Any debate? Judy?
Judy, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would propose that we take all these items together, having read them.
The problem is I would like to have them all be separate resolutions just so that we can do.
Well, we can write them as a separate resolution, but if everybody agrees with everything we're reading right now, can't we just vote on all of them once? And you can write them up, Will can write them up separately.
I mean, I don't particularly
Jill
want
is shaking her head.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to establish the Mayor's Office of Contract Services in the charter. I don't.
Okay, forget I mentioned it.
All right. So we still have the, I'm going to call the question on the resolutions on the floor, which was limiting the duration of emergency contracts to 2 years. Is there a second on calling the question? Yes.
Chair.
Great. Anyone opposed to calling the question? No. Is anyone opposed to that resolution? No. Okay. All right. Mandate reforms to alleviate the problem of late payment to vendors. So on this one, Marla specifically noted that if they change one letter in the charter to say that the PPB must pass rules preventing late payment instead of saying that it has the power to do so, that would alleviate the issue, and that's what they recommend. So that, I will say, sounds pretty good to me. Valerie.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. I think this is like a real necessary change to move things forward and to help these human service organizations move forward. So I would, I can't call the question, but I think this is a good one. Sorry.
So you've made a motion to that effect.
I'll make a motion that we do this one, so.
Okay. Is there a second? Judy.
Yes.
Okay. Ed, you have your hand up. You could call the question if you want.
Yeah, I want to call the question.
Very good. Is there a second? Yes. Anyone opposed to calling the question? I assume those hands are not for that. I see there's some hands up, but okay. So let's vote on it. Is anyone opposed to this one? No. All right, good. Next, okay, establish the Mayor's Office of Contract Services in the charter, and not to overly weigh in here. I would prefer to just skip this one. I don't feel strongly about it. I don't, it doesn't sound that great to me, but I also just don't know enough about it personally to want to oppose it. So I'm inclined to sort of skip it. Does anybody feel like they want to make a motion on this one, a resolution? Ed.
Oh, sorry, I'm unmuted. Sorry, yeah. Actually, you know what? This isn't such a bad idea. You know, I kind of share Michelle's concern about this whole murky world of contracts with the mayor. I'm loath to support more bureaucracy, but if this enables more oversight or elevates the office to more scrutiny, I'm all for it. So I guess I'm for it.
So you're making a motion to do it?
Yeah, make a motion to approve it. What the heck?
Okay. Is there a second?
Okay, fine. No seconds.
All right.
Okay. Oh well.
Michelle.
I'm sorry, it's not a second. I just had a different take on it. Ed sees it as affording more oversight. I'm opposed to it because I see it as affording the mayor more power with less oversight. So I don't know how you read this. We don't have any more information on
We
it.
can skip it because I think, you know, the resolution didn't get a second, so there's no resolution on the floor on it. I'm inclined to move.
Oh, okay. All right. That's fine.
Judy. Judy lowered her hand. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. Ensure that all relevant information is made available to city fiscal monitors. Tighten the requirements for cities' reserve accounts, including the rainy day fund. Any motion, and do we want to move on? Michelle. Michelle has her hand up. I'm calling on Michelle. Will, can you please unmute Michelle? Will, you there?
I'll make a resolution that we support that. That would only, seems like common sense. Relevant information is made available with the city's fiscal monitors. I would think that that's good government.
Okay. And I think in terms of the resolution, you want it just basically to track the wording of the bullet.
Yeah, just track the wording. Yeah.
Is there a second on that resolution? Judy?
Second.
All right. Anybody want to talk about it? Anybody want to call the question?
I call the can I call the question? It's my resolution.
It's a resolution. I would say under the circumstances, go for it.
I call the question.
Second, I'll second that. So is there anybody opposed to calling the question on this? Anyone opposed to the resolution? Okay, all right, so that one passed. So let's move to the next slide, please. Fiscal accountability, okay. This first one, I personally don't, I'm sort of inclined to skip, but if others want to have a resolution on it, we can do it. Otherwise, we can move on.
Now, let's move on.
Okay, I kind of feel the same way about the second one. I kind of feel that way about this whole slide, to be honest. I don't know if other people have, if there's anything on here that anybody wants to have a resolution on, I would say speak now. Otherwise, I think we'll just move on to the next item.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know if I was the only one, but did everybody freeze? Because
No.
I had to go off and come back in.
No.
So I was going to ask a question about the last item on the preceding page. Can you tell me what you did on that?
We passed a resolution in favor of it. So ensuring that, you know, the monitors have relevant info and tightening the requirements on the rainy day fund.
And I wanted to know what that meant.
I think it's a little bit, I mean, we're not being specific in terms of what additional info we want the monitors to have. We're not being specific about what the additional requirements we want there to be, but we're just saying as a matter of the kinds of changes we would like to see and sort of leave it to the Charter Revision Commission to hopefully implement those in some way and incorporate that feedback in their work.
So did you take a vote on that?
We did, yeah.
So I missed that vote, so I'd like to join the vote.
We'll count you as a yes if that's what you want.
Yeah, it's a yes.
Okay. So
I was
this
up
one, I think,
next.
yeah, understood. So this one, we're going to move on, I think, from this slide, unless anybody has a motion they want to make on any of these items. Going once, going twice. All right, let's go. Public safety. Yeah, I mean, this is one, well, I'm sort of inclined to skip also, but if anybody has something they want to do on any of these, Michelle.
Yeah, what do you think it means? And is public safety only the police? You're not talking about traffic safety, or, I mean, what does this mean?
It's vague. I mean, my guess is that's what they're talking about, the police, and it seems like, you know, yeah, I don't think the mayor gave specific any sort of explanation of what he was talking about. I think it just, and it certainly sounds good for folks to say we need more public safety in the charter in some way, but I don't really understand what it means.
No, I don't think, I think that would be fine for us to vote on it if they define public safety. But without that definition, I have no idea what this means.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we certainly have the ability, if we can come up with something, you know, we can put it in there, but I don't know. So I'm gonna go to Valerie.
I just, when I think of public safety, I also think of, you know, people living on the sidewalk. And the ability to give the, part of what I thought was this was supposed to encompass was the ability to take expedited action with respect to that as well. So I don't know if we just phrase this, Russell, as sort of a motion that I think it should strengthen opportunities for stakeholder input, which would include the community boards and citizens on that topic. And that we would want to make public safety have the broadest definition, including, you know, police, safe streets, you know.
But in terms of, yeah, I mean, go ahead. I mean, I mean, if you want to make a resolution, I think, you know, go for it. I mean, my question is, and my hesitation on this is, like, what additional, as a matter of the charter, right, as a matter of the city constitution, what additional processes or procedures do we want in place related to city legislation about public safety that, you know, isn't already there, or that would be different from every other sort of law that the city passes? That, to me,
Yeah,
it's
I guess I agree with you there, because why wouldn't every law that we have promote public safety? I mean, it's kind of
Well,
silly.
if you want, I mean, if you want to promote public safety, pass a law to do. I mean, if there are laws that we need or whatever, that's fine. It's just what I haven't heard. I mean, what we
All right,
were
then
essentially
maybe
told
we
is like,
should we skip this one, or is that what we're
I think
saying?
it's fine to skip it. I mean, I think unless somebody, like, unless we have ideas about things we would want to see, you know, let's put it in there. But I think given that, like, I mean, my impression from the presentation was that nobody had made effectively any actual specific substantive recommendation on it.
Maybe we just say then, with respect to public safety, we'd like to weigh in, but we don't know what the proposal is yet, and we reserve our right to weigh in once the commission comes forward with a proposal.
Again, I think if you want to make a resolution, I would, you know, do it. But I personally don't feel like, I don't think we need a resolution to say that we reserve our right to do something. I mean, we always, you know, we have the ability, we will always retain the ability to do something.
Okay, then I guess I'm in favor of skipping it, because I don't know how we would take a position, because it's too vague to have a position on.
There's no, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no, Michelle.
Yeah, the only way we could do it, if you want to do it, is make a positive statement. In other words, it may not have anything to do with this, but Community Board 8 would like to be a partner and have some say as to community safety, you know, within our community. We could address, or, you know, however you want to make that vague statement.
But again,
I
don't-
what's that mean in terms of
doesn't-
charter?
Doesn't pertain to the charter.
All right, then skip it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, look, and at the risk of, I mean, obviously I have views on this and I don't want to overly kind of guide the whole process here, but unless somebody makes a resolution on something on this slide, I think we're just going to move on.
I make a motion, we move on.
Very good. All right, let's do it. Let's go to the next page, please. Here we go.
All right, I have a resolution for the first number. As it turns out, the Office of Minority and Women is currently in the Office of Economic and Financial Opportunity. And the staff actually made a recommendation that the commission further consider and solicit feedback concerning measures to improve services provided to and promote the utilization of MWBEs, including the creation of a new agency dedicated to this purpose. And that's a staff recommendation, so that actually may happen. So it could just be broad. My resolution is to improve services provided to and promote the utilization of, I'm reading from the report, MWBEs, including the creation of a new agency dedicated to this purpose. And currently they're in another agency, and this would make it separate. And that's a recommendation of the staff.
So your resolution is to basically accept the recommendation of the staff.
Right.
Is there a second? Is anyone seconding this one? All right, I think so. I think in the absence of the second, I think we just leave it. Michelle.
What's MWBE?
It's the Minority and Women Business Owners. That's a designation.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So that would be to create a new agency for that?
Yes.
Right. Take it out of the office.
And utilize it. Yes, to promote women's businesses and minorities.
Nope.
Like apple pie.
All right. Any other resolutions on any of the items on this slide? Otherwise, I think we'll just move on from here. All right. Here we go. Okay. Any resolutions on any of these items or one way or another?
And these were not in the recommended list.
All right. Is there another slide? Judy. You unmute Judy, please.
Can we go back to the prior slide? I didn't finish reading something, and I think I have a comment on the item.
We're back.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure I understand what this means, second from the bottom, the Department of Buildings seeks to be allowed to amend technical provisions of the construction codes by rule and to clarify the adjudication process. I mean, is there a problem with that? That
I
the
don't know.
law is not clear? That it needs.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's one where, you know, I could see like maybe it's good, maybe it's not. It's one of these things where I just don't know enough to want to weigh in.
Okay, then let's move on.
Valerie, you have an item on one of these?
Yeah, I mean, on the slide we're on, I mean, okay, I think we don't have, I think your point on these is we don't have enough information on them. Is that the idea?
Well, okay, so speaking for myself, I don't really, well,
let me
there are
talk-
some that I don't love the idea of, frankly, just from the description, but there's none that I want to make a resolution on personally.
Okay, all right, because I kind of feel the same way, but I don't know if we feel the same way about all of them, but
I'm sure there's some in here that we might even potentially oppose, but again, I just not really knowing what they are. I just.
And my understanding is the way that I think Marla explained these are coming from specific New York City agencies, right, that are looking for these fixes, if you will.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, let's go to the next page.
I mean, actually, you know, just as I'm thinking about it, I mean, the one in the second bullet.
Exactly.
Right. The thing about ULURP, obviously, that sort of raises hackles.
Exactly.
I don't know. I frankly don't know what they're talking about, but there's a degree to
I don't frankly want to exempt anything from ULURP at this point. That's why
it just occurred to me, like, maybe that's a resolution we should just put in. Like, as long as the charter revision's looking at the charter, since ULURP is a charter issue, why don't we say we don't want you to mess with ULURP?
Yeah, that was the one I was focusing on too.
Second, we don't want you
okay.
messing with ULURP. Second.
All right, so motion to formally like object to any change that would exempt flood protection acquisitions from ULURP and the competitive process.
Oh, no, I don't want it to be that specific. I would just say
okay.
We don't want any changes to ULURP, essentially.
Okay.
Okay, I'll second that.
All right, that's
my
even
resolution.
better. Wherever it is in the charter, we're against it. Wherever it is in the charter revision that you're.
So
okay.
Michelle seconded my resolution, and
okay.
Judy.
Call the question.
Second.
Okay.
All right. Anyone opposed to calling the question? Anyone opposed to that resolution? All right. Anything else on this page? All right. Do we have, Will, can you please move us to the next slide?
I was actually in favor of that consumer and worker protection, expanded authority to demand business ownership information for businesses under investigation. But
okay.
I mean,
yeah, you want to make a resolution?
I'm going to make a resolution that we support that one.
Is there a second? Yes, Michelle seconds. Any discussion, Judy?
Call the question.
Second. Anyone opposed to calling the question on this? Anyone voting against this resolution? All right. Barbara. You're unmuted.
What is the one about admissions?
Can we go back a slide?
Yeah. Is that they're mandating the cities to
I think no one on this
curtail certain admissions?
I think none of us know more about any of like this than what it says, than what you know.
Well, maybe you know what it says more than I do.
Okay, so first of all, this one, okay, so what it says is it's the Office of Climate and Environmental Justice seeks to consolidate responsibilities under a single entity to impose emissions reduction requirements on tenants of city property and to exempt flood protection acquisitions from ULURP and competitive processes. So I think right off the bat, the ULURP aspect of it, I mean, just given the resolution we just passed, I think people are not very excited about.
Okay, so
Otherwise,
yeah.
yeah, go on.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the rest of it? I mean, again, I can.
No,
Yeah.
I just, when I saw it, it rang a bell to me.
All right. Okay. So yeah, let's move back to the next page, please. So the last one, I think we already took a position on.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I am against anything in the penultimate one, if you will. The Department of Transportation seeks to align the charter language with federal to reduce public hearing requirements. I just, this again goes against the public hearing requirements. This is basically ability to issue financial grants, to expand its jurisdiction over sidewalk roadway cafes, and to streamline the process of adding e-bike charging cabinets on the streets. I can tell you that at borough board meetings, this is a hot issue, and community boards need the right to weigh in on that. And streamlining the process, to me, is code for eliminating public input.
All right. So do you want to make a?
I want to make a motion to be against the Department of Transportation's request here, proposal.
Is there a second? Michelle seconds. Okay, discussion or the like. I'm going to call on Michelle.
No, I was seconding Valerie's motion.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? Judy.
Call the question.
Is there a second? Yes. Anyone opposed to calling the question? All right. Anyone opposed to the resolution? I'm going to vote no on this one. All right, so this passes. Any other resolutions on? Sorry, let me make sure I have this. Any other resolutions on this page, Judy?
The Department of Corrections seeks to revise the authority over prisoners requiring hospital care while awaiting arraignment. I don't get that. Why wouldn't they have authority if they're in their care?
Corrections seeks to revise authority over prisoners requiring. Well, go ahead, Valerie.
I don't have any more information that's here, but awaiting arraignment doesn't mean that I don't know what their authority is now, so I don't know how it could be.
I know, it just seems like a very strange thing that it's even there. If they have the prisoner in their control, why wouldn't they be making the arrangements needed? I mean,
here's the
understand it. It's very strange. That's all. Skip it.
The issue is, yeah, I think the issue is, look, we don't know the meaning of what revise means in this context. I mean, we don't know if the idea is that they're going to try and take authority over these people. We don't know if they're trying to get rid of authority over these people. We just don't know. And it's not, I mean,
I just find it strange. That's all.
Okay. Again, I don't know what, yeah, I just don't know what.
And we're against, and Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, we're against the last one, which is to eliminate the public hearings.
Yeah, we already passed that resolution.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it's a credit to IBO that we even have a list of these to be able to have, weighed in on the ones that we did. And I really appreciate they're doing it. But the fact is we're just limited in I mean, necessarily by the speed of how all of this is going on and the breadth of this Charter Revision Commission, and it's all the more reason why we're going to put those provisions in. So, all right, so we've gotten through the list. I think there is a remaining question, which is, do we want to go down the road of, say, getting into the term limits question for community board members or not? So I'll put that issue on the table, and I will call on Valerie in that regard.
I mean, this is an issue that has come up, and I'm sure Russell has heard it in his, just completed term at Borough Board, that we should get rid of this term limit proposal. And that people who want to stay, I mean, obviously you're still subject to reappointment by the borough president, so you shouldn't have to get off. Somebody should, if you want to come back, you shouldn't be term limited out, especially, areas of expertise, et cetera. There's no saying that shouldn't happen. So I would be in favor of putting a resolution that says that the Charter Commission should go back and do away with term limits. That's my motion.
There a second? Yes, Barbara agrees. Okay. All right. So I see some hands up on this. I'm going to call on Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
I have another resolution, Russell, so I'm asking complete Valerie's and complete the vote, and then please call on me again.
You got it. Judy.
Call the question.
Second. Anyone opposed to calling the question? Anyone opposed to this resolution? All right. Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I would say we should send this resolution to Gail. She was she will be a big advocate in this regard. So I think it would be helpful for her to know that we passed it to Gail Brewer. I see no harm in sending it to her. But anyway, I would like to make a resolution about the wording requirements of charter revision questions that appear on the ballot. Everyone that I have ever seen is written from the point of view of an advocate. In other words, they're never just fact, but they take a position. And by virtue of the fact that they appear on the ballot, the position that's inherent in the description is encouraging support of that initiative. So that's my resolution. We can put it into word that the wording of items that appear, charter revision or anything that appears on the ballot should be factual and not express any point of view. And I'm happy to hear from anybody who could make what I said more clear, more definitive.
About objective? Should be
objective, stating the fact.
Stating, yeah.
You should not be able to glean the point of view from what you're reading. And that's true of anything on the ballot. Is there a second for that? We'll clean up the wording, but Barbara seconds it. Okay.
So my personal just recollection of ballot initiatives that I've seen is I never felt like they were pushing one way or the other. I mean, that's just my sort of subjective reading of them, as I always felt like they were.
Well, obviously I have felt it, but it's not just my point of view. I've gotten this feedback from a lot of people.
Understood. And look, I think this
it's not a harmful resolution. It doesn't dispute what your thought is. I mean, if it could be made,
if it's in there already, then whatever. Then what's the next? It's true. Go ahead.
Barbara has
a comment on what I'm sorry, what Michelle said. It isn't. I don't think it's the actual proposal. It's the description of the proposal that's always when this will help. Water in such and such an area. It isn't it isn't the proposal as such, and you may think it's the proposal also. The description really, I think, needs to be fairer. And I agree that there is definitely a bias. Like, how could you not vote for more water for a community type of thing? Do you agree, Michelle?
And how could you not vote for limiting all those people on the community board?
Well, that one, all right. I don't know what the bias thing was there, but
No, we had a council member that was all for
oh, I
it.
understand that. I'm talking about what was actually on the
I know.
ballot. Judy,
Call the question.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, before we do this, I think because this one I think really does sort of come down to wording. I just want to make sure that we're like on the same page about that. So what I think we want to say is factual and objective. Is that what we sort of landed on?
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming on it, I'm sorry, Ed had his hand up. Go ahead. I don't want to jump. He hasn't talked.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking this up. So it was the state, and maybe this is like a friendly amendment or something, or just to get to what you're after. Governor Hochul signed this back in when did she sign this? November, whatever it is. I'm looking online here. It's a bill out of Albany. Sign legislation, make it easier for New Yorkers to understand proposed constitutional amendments and other questions put to voters on ballots in New York State. Under the legislation, proposed amendments and other ballot measures must be explained in plain and clear language that allows voters to understand the practical impact of adopting or rejecting the measure they're being asked to vote on. Do we want to put something like that in there? The legislation requires questions, including proposed.
I think it covers
The bill sets a standard for all ballot language to be written at or below an 8th grade reading level and to be written in a yes or no format, so all citizens have a fair opportunity to confidently cast their ballots. You know, I don't know. I just throw it out there. I don't know if you're interested in any of that. I mean, I know you say it's written in a biased way. With Russell, my beef with them is that they're inscrutable. You know, they're written like the election law. You got to read it 5 times to figure out what it is that it's actually saying. That's my complaint. But that's all. I just throw that out there. You know, if you want to put that into the resolution, that was all.
So we'll go to Michelle because it's her resolution. It seems to me. Well, let's go to Michelle.
Yeah.
That was very, very helpful, Ed. Very helpful to hear that. However, I don't think it's the same thing, because writing something so that others understand it does not necessarily preclude you using, subjective and biased language. And actually, the example that Barbara gave was a perfect one. And we see this all the time in when somebody presents to us on the community board. Let's say it's the DOT comes to mind. They present something to us. This is going to improve your road. This is going to be better than this. This is going to, those are all subjective words. Just tell me what you're doing. I'll decide if it's better or if it improves anything. And that's really my objection with what's on the ballot. So while what you say is true, her requirement doesn't address this. So
Michelle, what do you think about the idea of adding the word clear?
No, I mean, it's fine because we're not in favor of things being unclear, but it's the
to
bias.
Me, that's what. Understood. I think
it's factual, no opinion. Facts. No adjectives that define the action. Nothing that's going to tell me it's better or something is improved. I just want to know what the proposal is.
So
factual and non-judgmental and whatever adjectives you can think of.
Again, I think we should figure out the adjectives before we vote on this, just because this strikes me as not
factual
what I would
is
say.
One.
Right. It sounds like factual. I think objective, I thought was a good one.
Objective.
And I think I would throw in clear to address the point that Ed's making, if you're okay with it, just because I think
I would say accurately describes rather than clear.
So we'll say accurate.
Accurate.
Okay. Barbara.
Yeah, I would like to use the word the pros and cons. There's sometimes they'll have things and say the pros are this, and the cons are that. I find it very clear when you read the explanation. I also don't know how you would get away with saying the why they have it, but they're not telling they're telling why they want it and not the downfalls of it. And
I think it sounds to me like pros and cons is very different from what Michelle is talking about. So I think if you want that.
I don't know if Michelle's saying clear. I think that it's clear.
She doesn't want, so she ruled out clear and it's her resolution. But I think pros and cons also, if what you want is pros and cons, I think this is not the resolution for you.
Well, she's not accepting the amendment.
She's not? Okay.
No, she doesn't want to add pros and cons. All right, so look, the question's been called on this. I think we've done a good job of kind of refining it further. So the resolution is to say that any sort of ballot language like this, should make the item that's being voted on, it should describe it objectively, factually, and accurately. So is anyone voting against this? All right, it passes. All right, one item that is on the agenda, item 6, is, and I don't know if other people feel the way that I do about this, but I put it on there as one of the co-chairs, which is to say the role of the public advocate. And I personally, it's a view that I have, I don't think the city needs a public advocate. I have never, ever heard anyone explain to me what the job is actually supposed to do. I think that every single elected official that we vote for is a public advocate. They're supposed to be our advocate. I sort of reject the premise that the role of the mayor is sort of distinct in some way from a public advocate, or that like the same people who are electing the mayor also need to elect somebody to oppose or counterbalance the mayor. I think, frankly, as a historical matter, it arose out of very sort of purely political considerations in terms of who the mayor was at a particular time and so on, that I just don't think is appropriate, regardless of what anybody thinks about who that mayor was or who the current mayor is or any of that. I don't think that's a basis to have a position in the charter. So I will make a resolution, which is to say, I think the office of public advocate should be abolished. There's a second. Any comment on this? I'll go to Judy.
Russell, I think the only thing the public advocate does is if the mayor were to die tomorrow, then the public advocate would be the mayor for 90 days until we have an election. So if we get rid of the public advocate, and I'm all for it, I agree with you 100%, then we need to state what who's in succession, who succeeds if something happens to the mayor.
So I think to me, the natural answer to that would be the other citywide elected official, which is the comptroller. So I think to me, that would be.
Well, maybe we could make that part of the resolution.
Yeah, I'll accept that as a friendly amendment, that we specify that we want the comptroller to be the new successor to the mayor in the absence of the public advocate.
For 90
days.
Exactly. Same process, same everything. It's a comptroller instead of public advocate. All right, Michelle.
I have no objection, but I need clarification. What is in the charter at the moment about the public advocate? Just the fact that the position exists and the fact that he is a successor to the mayor? Is that pretty much what's there?
It definitely says those two things. Honestly, I don't know whether it spells out a purpose for the role. And it doesn't, if it does not change my view, but I don't know the answer to your question.
Saying your residence to a nation.
Correct.
And move the role to the city controller.
move the successor.
Right.
Yes, so now the controller would succeed the mayor. Because I think that is one of the few sort of defined.
There's
things
not
that the
like a
public-
lieutenant
public
mayor, like the lieutenant governor who is an automatic successor.
There's deputy mayors, but it's not the same thing. Yeah, it's not like the
And
lieutenant.
those aren't, I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk, Russell, go ahead.
It's different. It's not the same. It's not like that.
Okay.
I'm going to call on Ed.
I actually oppose the idea, although I do share your assessment of the useless as, and fill in your blank for analogy that anyone would like to use for that. I get it. I come from the position that power is where power goes. And I just think that the occupants of that office have not really known what to do with it. Now, that whether that is a product of the fact that their budget is minuscule, or they're not quite sure whether they want to be the ombudsman for the city, or whatever it is. But I think it could be a useful role. And I do think you now raise an issue, and there is no way that I would support letting the comptroller become the mayor. That concentrates too much power in the hands of the comptroller, and I don't know about that just in general. And then it sets off a chain reaction, as opposed to having the speaker of the city council move in, or maybe they're already in the charter on the succession. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, I do share your view that the occupants of the public advocate have not inspired anyone to want to keep it going. But, for me, just in terms of now the budget's like, 110 billion on the way to $1 trillion, for God's sakes. The minor amount of money that this office occupies, and it's in the charter. I don't know. I just rather keep it. I think it just opens up more issues, but that's just one humble opinion.
Okay. And look, and I want to be clear too, like I'm not casting aspersions on any current or past or whatever, holders of the office. It's really about the office itself. In my view. So any other comments? Sherry, were you, did you want to comment on this?
I'm wondering if we follow the federal succession, that it should be the city council president. I mean, that would be, when you think after the president, vice president, and then it's the speaker. So I'm wondering, as opposed to putting the controller in there, I would think it would be the city council president should be next in line for 90 days.
I think the comptroller is more like the vice president and more like the sort of public advocate, in the sense that it's a citywide elected office.
Yeah, but
so I think it's better to have I think the successor should be another citywide elected official. And I think there's no equivalent. There's really no, there isn't actually a federal equivalent to the public advocate or the comptroller, in the sense that there's no other federally, nationwide elected person other than the president and the vice president, who's like sole job.
Yeah, that's do you know do any other cities have public advocates?
That I don't know. And I will say again, that the answer to that question does not change my view.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right, guys, it is 9:35, so I think we need to wrap this up.
All right, so I'll call on Judy, who I think is of the same mindset.
Call the question.
Any seconds? Yes. Anyone opposed to calling the question? All right, raise your hand if you are voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause on this item. Ed, I'll just call on you to vote.
Yeah, voting no.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so that passes. So by my count, I think we passed 13 resolutions.
I was going to abstain, but it passes.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I just don't know anything about
abstain.
this. So I'm going to just abstain, but it passes.
Okay, I think it still passes. You're not voting. You want to raise a new item.
Sorry, I'm moving on. So
all right, yeah, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Here's what I want to say. I want to say thank you to Sherry and Russell for taking on this task. and jumping in as quickly as they did on this issue that we were presented with very quickly, as well as people noted before. So I just want to extend a thank you to the both of them for jumping on this and putting this together. Really appreciate it. I think everybody on the board feels the same way. And then I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Well, one thing, Russell, how about if we split this up? You seem to be keeping track on the resolutions. I'll do the minutes for the meeting so we can attach the resolutions to them before the board meeting. That work for you?
Yeah, I'll do the resolutions, yes, and you do, yes.
And I'll
please,
do
that would
the
be great.
minutes and then we'll get them in so they can be voted on. And we don't get a email from Will, where's your stuff? Great. All right, now I think.
We'll wait
Michelle.
48 hours. We'll wait 48 hours, Shari and Russell, before we send the first email asking for the minutes and the resolution.
Okay, yeah, I don't even know.
Michelle has is her hand up. What, Michelle?
And the cover letter.
Yeah, oh, the cover, well, Russell will do that too.
I don't, no, I don't write the cover letters. That's, no, I'll write the resolutions. That's not my job to write the cover letter.
I'll write the cover letter.
Okay, good.
All right.
Yeah, because you basically want to say that they rushed.
I think what I said at the beginning is what I'm gonna say.
I think that's fine. I just look, I don't want to overstep my bounds.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's good. All right.
So we have a motion to adjourn, I think. So we'll
adjourn. Thanks,